All right. Recording to the computer, y'all. All right.
Yeah, and it'll create a transcript for you.
I've seen them, but I'm like, how do you upload it? Because it takes a long time and all this. Anyways, it's a so more and more students will start to trickle in. Good morning and happy Tuesday to everybody. Today we have, I'm going to put the stuff I had on for today's conversation on the back burner because we have two guest speakers today. We have Mr. Jason Bell, Professor Jason Bell from San Francisco State. And then around 10 o'clock, we're going to have Dr. Christopher Bickel come in and do a presentation on plantations to prisons. I'm going to offer today extra credit. I'll put up a discussion post after class for five points. And 5 points is a lot of points considering I only scale to 100, right? 5 points is a lot of points. And those of you who post in the discussion about your takeaways from today's talks, it can be either or. I'm always looking for depth and concise. Some of y'all like to write a lot, which is beautiful, but I like looking for concise. I'm looking for depth of what you get out of today's conversation, either one. So please pay attention. Normally we open up with the check-in. We open up with how some of the folks doing. We're going to skip that today because I really want to get right into it. I know a couple people are still logging in. Good to see folks logging in, and other folks will log in. So let's just go ahead and get it started. We have in the class today, Mr. Jason Bell. And let me just give you got no choice, right? But to give a beautiful introduction to this man, because I work for Project Rebound at California State University, San Marcos. It's a program so that when you all are done with your associate's degree and you're ready to seek out a bachelor's degree or master's degree, or we can push you to another level, when you come to the CSU system, you have Project Rebound to support everything you do. We've been doing this work at San Marcos for about 2 years now. We're going into August, right? Maybe a little longer. But Mr. Bell has been doing this for a long time. San Francisco State University. And by the way, if you're interested in going to San Francisco State University, this is your man right here. Jason Bell is a friend. He's a mentor. He's a brother. He's somebody that I completely look up to in this field of reentry, empathy, care, understanding when it comes to prisons and reentry and how we actually, do what we do to support people. And I always say it like us, you know what I mean? Because we're here, we're like, we're all in it together. And this man right here is a mentor, friend, and a brother. So Mr. Bell, good morning to you.
I'd like top of the morning.
Introductions, but there's going to be more people logging on. So, how about I just turn it over to you and enlighten us.
I'll see what I can do with it, but Dr. Martin, thank you so much for allowing me in the space, and all of you too. I hope I'm not disrupting the flow. I just want to come and share a little bit with you and get to know you, because I know this is the mighty almighty transitions crew right now. You all are getting ready to take that big leap. I'm hoping. So folks are within the next maybe semester or probably in the fall. Some of you are transferring.
I don't know if any of these folks are ready to transfer. We'll have to see how many units some folks have, but we got Luis in the room who just got a full ride to UCLA. So
okay, congratulations, man.
But other folks we're working on. We're working on trying to get them going.
Okay, so sooner or later, well, in a semester, 2 semester, 3, whatever it is, you all, I gotta admit, you all are doing the toughest part right now, as far as I remember. That general education piece is tough, man, because you're all over the place. And I remember having it kind of shape my perception of what higher ed was about. I mean, it's a beautiful time because you get to kind of test drive a few different things, but to me, I gotta admit, it got a lot easier once I got to focus on whatever my major was, and finding that thing was important. So a lot of times when I ask folks, you know, do you have a thing? But what would be considered your thing? That sounds kind of strange, but it's important. It's really important to this journey, I think. When I say that to you all, what comes to mind? Anybody? Oh, are they Martina? Can they?
Yeah,
if they have some.
Yeah, don't be shy, y'all. Come on, y'all do some good talking in this class. Don't.
I don't want to. I'm not talking at you. We are conversating.
Your thing, like the thing that makes you stand out, kind of like talent, maybe.
Yeah, it definitely can be, or some, yeah, that because many times people identify directly with that talent. It's easy for them and they're good at it. And but yeah. others, what else? Larry said, can you please reiterate? I was asking when I ask you like what is your thing? What comes to mind?
I guess you could say your habits, your hankerings is your thing. That's where one would have to try to do their best to identify the differences between needs and wants because of those hankerings and because of, you know, what it is that you need and want makes it your thing.
Okay, yeah, separating the needs and the actuals. It's important. I think that is important. This is seriously important to us, especially if we have histories in making some mistakes. I think what I'm getting at is something that drives you, something that you have a passion for, and making it connect directly to this educational experience. I know sometimes that can be really hard. Some people are motivated purely by money or you know what careers make the most money or are attractive to someone else they may be trying to impress. But for us, I think it's a little more important. If we're gonna make it through this, if we're gonna shine in this experience, we better identify with it and find out what our thing and that connection is. I see two hands popping up now, Bree and Margaret. I can't remember who popped up first though.
Actually, Lawrence has his hand up.
Oh, okay, Lawrence too over here.
And then Margaret came in that order. So.
My thing is education. You know, I am formerly incarcerated, recently discharged.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir. I would really like to see the Department of Corrections put out of business. And the only way I see that can happen is through education. And not just educate formerly incarcerated or potentially incarcerated people, you know, us. We have to educate the educators. We have to educate the administrator. We have to educate the voting public. We have to educate the non-voting public in order for me to pursue my goal of putting the Department of Corrections out of business, breaking the school to prison pipeline, breaking down that prison industrial complex, the education industrial complex, all of the things that have led to this dismal state that our education system is in. Everybody's got to be a part of that. Teaching, educating myself and sharing that education with others. I believe that is a big step towards that solution. So that's my thing.
Yep, and that is a huge responsibility, Lauren. And I dig it because that's a journey that there's a lot of defined details that go into it, but you're driven to reach it, and that's important. And I'm gonna get at why it's important a little bit later. Go ahead, Bree or Margaret. Who was next?
Bree.
Bree.
So I guess my thing, this is what's kind of driving me into social work is I went through a time where I was isolated and I didn't have a lot of resources or a lot of people around me to help me or support me. And it took a caseworker who had the knowledge, the education, the resources to help me. And she made such a huge difference in my life and my son's life. And so I kind of, was always picking our brain for resources. And next thing I know, I have people who were in my like jobs classes and a lot of the programs that I worked, they were coming to me because I started having all these resources. I started knowing about how all this stuff works and, having those resources to share with them. And they were just kind of too timid to ask their worker. Like they were too scared to reach out because they felt like they were inconveniencing their worker. And so it felt easier for them to come to me and ask me about resources. And then I started getting super into being more educated about how our systems work and, what resources there are for people. And I just want to be more a part of that in a bigger way.
You kind of found out you had a knack, or people identified you as being having that presence that was welcoming, or that they could identify with, and you actually became pretty good at it, probably, right? So that's right. Sometimes that thing calls us. They call that planned happenstance. That's important to pay attention to, but you only recognize it if you're paying attention. But Margaret, I think Margaret had her hand up.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I don't know if I'm answering this question right, but I feel like my thing would be God, because without him, I wouldn't, I know I wouldn't be alive at this point. Like he changed the direction of my life, and he's like the number one thing that I like aspire to, and like try to like, all my good decisions are pretty much, for him. That's how I feel. But at the same time, I don't want to like, I don't know if the question was like, oh, like, I don't know if it's like inappropriate to say, but that's just how I feel about that, you know?
Yeah, that's a little, I guess those are big shoes to fill. I don't know if you can aspire. I mean, that's more of a, motivation to get you through every day. I'm on a more personal level, I'm seeing like something.
I didn't know if I was answering it right.
No, it's okay. There is no right or wrong. We're dialoguing here. This is a discussion. It's not about being right or wrong. Go ahead.
Okay.
So yeah, what I'm getting at too is that if you don't have that thing, I don't care what walks of life we find ourselves in, whether we were dedicating ourselves to the game or the criminal lifestyle or whatever, you had something that you were into. If you didn't, somebody else, I bet you, will figure something out for you. And I bet you, I'm willing to bet that it doesn't have your best interest in mind. Oftentimes, when people come to you and they figure out what a plan for you, basically, another person, an outsider, comes to you and has a plan for you. Who is that plan probably serving? Not you, right? It's
yeah.
probably them. So it's key for us in order, survival out here, direct survival is to find a thing, what our thing is, and be motivated to kind of make steps, whether it be baby steps or large steps toward it. And oftentimes, I'll just say the recipe that worked for me was school. It kept me focused. I had something to drive for every year. And once I found what it was that I wanted to study in school, I was good. I ended up loving it. The irony of it is, though, I spent most of my younger life running away from school for silly, I guess what I call stinking thinking, ass backwards ideas that stuff was for square folks or the, not the cool folks, the other folks that weren't me. And I just did myself a huge disservice. So what I'm stressing here is when you find that thing, even if it wasn't school, whatever it would be, whatever you're aiming for, the father, you gotta do all that you can to get there. because it works for us. For us, this and for me, and I just have this kind of I like images to kind of help shape stuff for me. And when I look at it as balancing the scales, like you see, many of you have seen the scales of injustice leaning. They're leaning one way, and that's another way. It's not serving us oftentimes. That lean is not leaning in our direction. It's often, if you look at many of the jails and prisons, it's filled with poor folks, Black and brown folks, folks that look just like us. So it's not serving us. So and when I talk about working toward that thing that's positive, it's our way of balancing the scales, because we mastered ideas of parole, probation, incarceration, and drug abuse and all that stuff. So we got that side leading. Now this is our opportunity to discharge those paroles and give all that, like Lawrence just did, give that stuff back to them. Get degrees, hold career jobs for months. Oftentimes, if we did something, we weren't able to sustain it. That's our way of balancing those scales. So we can balance it out ourselves, but we have to work toward it. And part of it is knowing what we're working toward. So that was my point of the having your thing. But I see Richie, I see a hand up over here.
Yeah, I didn't really catch the beginning part, but I just want to share, like, on that topic of like changing up like everything that or programming all our old ways and stuff. Like, I just got out 3 months ago, and I had to totally do like the complete opposite of what I've been doing, most of my life. And I had to change up, from hanging around with gang members. I went to surrounding myself with positive, a support group, and instead of not going to programs, I put myself in a program, instead of having a lot of downtime where I wasn't doing something. I overloaded myself where I just was constantly doing something, where I didn't have no time to wander off and get into that stinking thinking that you're talking about, because that's how I get in trouble, is when I start doing that stinking thinking, and then I resort to other past stuff that lead me eventually to self-destruction. But yeah, man, and then I had another new area I was like into, was like my sobriety and dealing with that. Now I had to try to find ways to try to like pick up natural highs, other ways, like whether it's working out or meditating or reading or drawing or painting or whatever it was. I needed to occupy my thoughts and my mind, to distract me from all those years of constantly repeating the same cycle, of trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. I'm trying to program my mind to think in a different way. It's new to me. I'm barely taking baby steps at it, but 90 days out, I mean, and I'm barely getting comfortable on that path, I mean, because it's new to me. But
Yeah.
I just like to share a little part of where I'm coming from right now.
No, that's important, Richie, and,
Yeah.
and welcome home, man. You just said 3 months. That's still real new, man, and that's important for everyone to recognize. Welcome home, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and that's scary, man. Doing different things. I know even some of you, as you plan for that big step to, like, you hear all these ideas and preconceived notions about the four-year university. Sometimes that can be scary. But let's talk about those reservations. Let's talk about things that concern you most. Because you have people like Martine was explaining to you. You're not alone in this walk. There's a whole state full of folks, and I say that because for a while I thought we were like unique in the Bay Area. As I go from not just all of California, I mean, whether we go way to Humboldt State or all the way down to San Diego or wherever, people are dealing with the same kind of reservations and fears after incarceration, but they're shining. I mean, I got like over 100 people in my phone that have done great things, way more than I have ever done. So I know it can be done. So it's not like I'm just talking to you and making this shit up. And then I go to the East Coast. I have some cohorts and friends at Rutgers University that are dealing with it too, that have done a lot of time in those New Jersey prisons in the East Coast, and they're getting back and going to Rutgers. And for a while, Rutgers was really shy on allowing folks with those kind of histories in their spaces too. It was very new to them. They weren't as, I mean, they were really behind what we were doing in California. So I only say that to say that we are a part of a huge movement, but I really want to work through and let you know that if you have reservation, you have concerns, let's talk about that. Let's talk like some of the biggest things that worry you about doing well in a four-year university. Anyone?
Understanding theory.
Who said it?
That was me. Understanding theory.
Okay. Oh, theory of whatever your discipline is.
Yeah.
Do not let that. I mean, theory. It's a bunch of gobbledygook, but sometimes you identify with it. Sometimes it takes time. My advice on theory, especially the classics, is to ask questions, man. That's what really helped me, because it was tough. Research was tough at first. I had to spend a lot of time in the lab. Get folks next to you that you trust and know that can help you through it, because there's always going to be those classes that are tougher than others, but there's going to be some that you'll realize that you got this in the bag, and that's probably the majority of them. And I will tell you this: when I entered the classroom right after prison, I was disappointed in what they consider with the traditional college-going young folks. And when I say that because I felt like they didn't appreciate that opportunity that they had the way that I did. When I was sitting in that class, I was front and center. I'm a student. I'm not missing a class. They're playing around, joking, talking about Sex in the Cities and little shit that didn't matter to me at all. To me, they're like looking at how many days they can miss and still maintain a passing grade. And they're figuring out they're spending a lot of energy figuring out ways to avoid school. And to me, I'm trying to figure out every day that I can be there, every extra hour, if I can, to be there, to do the best that I can. Because my freedom depends on it depended on school at the time. So it was very important to me. They didn't get it. And I didn't say it to them, but I just paid attention. So I know that there's a space for us here. And oftentimes you're going to run into teachers that need you, whether they know it or not. And I'll explain that in a minute. But I see two hands that popped up before.
Professor Bell, I just wanted to ask you a question. What you said earlier, when your thing finds you, you said that's called natural happenstance?
Planned happenstance. It's a guy named Planned Happenstance. A guy named Crumbles that kind of coined the term. I can't take credit for that, but it's about that's how sometimes your careers or your future kind of loves kind of fall in your lap. You didn't plan. It's a little bit different. Might be different than what you initially planned, but you end up taking it and running with it. I see Margaret again and Richie. Who was first?
Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, wait, me or no?
Yeah, go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm scared of, I think I'm scared of like the studying aspect, because like what I want to do is be like I want to start off as a dental assistant and then maybe become like a dentist one day. And I'm just afraid that like, because all I've ever been was like a drug addict, and like I didn't even graduate high school, so I got just bad grades and stuff. So it's like doing college, it's scary, because like, I mean, in general, it's scary because I don't know if I'm smart enough to do that. And those are my goals, but it's like I'm just scared of all that information I have to like memorize, and it's just intimidating. I think that's the studying aspect is what I'm afraid of, I think.
Yeah, studying is a skill that is important, Margaret. And one thing about it, that has a lot to do with your thing as well, because you're gonna find folks that are gonna tell you, oh, the best way to do it is cram, procrastinate, and wait. That might not be your style. And the earlier you figure out what your style is going to work for you and benefit you better. I learned that is completely not my style. I got to do stuff way in advance, start stuff way in advance. But I bet you by that first year, I got my style down and I was shining. But it takes some of that internal work and investigation to get there. Don't follow the lead of some of these lames that think they got it or are not appreciating it like I just talked about. You got to do your thing.
So I have to like find my style of like like what works for me type thing
Yeah.
and just go with that.
Yeah, there is more than one style. So I know, and I say that because you're going to run into those folks that tell you this is how you do it, and that might not be the way for you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Richie.
Yeah, pretty much piggybacking off of that, right? I pretty much answered my question, but if I was a resort, go on and proceed in my education on a couple other years, I'd be like worried about like the studying part of it too. Would it be too much for me? Would it be out of my league? Will I be comfortable? Will they be comfortable? Will I be embraced? Is my caliber a little too much for that, environment? I don't know. But all I know is like, the last time I was in a school setting, I was in juvenile hall getting my GED. So other than that, I'd never been like, other than like Palomar College the other day when we was on campus, I'd never been like actually at a facility, a campus, walking in like inside a classroom. So, it would be new for me. So I'd kind of be like, I don't know if I'd be comfortable or not, but that would be worrying about me. I'm worried about
feeling comfortable to be there or in place. And that's important.
Because like one thing, like, transitions, these are my people right here. We all got something in common and relate to one another in transitions. Outside transitions, I don't know. I never explored that realm. So, that's where it'll be new to me.
Well, I know exactly what that feeling is like because I felt it at one time. And I do know like the same thing with rebound. There was nothing more empowering to me than have that office and that campus where I could go to and talk about, like, I might have been dealing with stress parole. I couldn't talk to these other suckers about. I just couldn't do it. And I don't want them in my business. But I felt comfortable enough with that hub on campus to go, man, say, man, I'm dealing with this dude wants me to be at the house and I got things to do. And, I didn't feel comfortable sharing that with people outside of my immediate circle. But it's important that all of you know you are scholars and you deserve to be in that space. And what I learned is we have something to give these universities. We are educating the educational system in many, many ways because they have these preconceived ideas about us based on a history, maybe some mistakes that we made in the past, and they think that defines our future. But I learned that we have a whole bunch to give because I ran into when I was in an undergrad program at San Francisco State, there was a noted scholar. Matter of fact, she graduated from Harvard and she was teaching sociology of law. And this lady was explaining to me what it's like on the first day of prison. and I'm like, and she was passing out some really misinformation, but it put me in an awkward spot. I don't necessarily want to expose my hand to this entire class. I'm trying to get through it, and I'm doing everything I can. But there was some things that she said that were wrong. There was oftentimes they show that Stanford experiment in colleges, on college campuses, and they're telling the class this and that. Everybody will act this way. Everybody will do this and everybody do that. And I'm thinking, hell no, everybody won't. Some, they got some juveniles that would challenge some of that shit that was happening in that of the experiment.
Yeah.
So it puts you in an awkward space. But what happened though, Richie, is I didn't necessarily expose my hand to the entire class, but I waited when the time was right. And I talked to the professor on the side and I told her about a few things that maybe some young folks, even young people in the communities down the street wouldn't act the same way because they know the consequences are different. There's a very big difference between an experiment and the consequences of either losing time or getting your brains blown out by a gunner in a gun tower than, you know, getting kicked out of an experiment. So I challenged her and I told her why. And in the end, we ended up becoming really good friends. But it was, so she learned through something that day too. There's a whole bunch that I can learn from her, but there's some things that she can learn from us. And I think that is why it is extremely important that you don't shy away from some of those fears or you thinking that you don't belong in those spaces, because you have something to give. And when those times get tough, you know what I did too? Is like when I was having those difficult times studying like theory or something like that, or I know statistics was rough for me. That was a rough time for me. But I you know, I looked at those people that were doing well and maybe looking down on folks that were struggling. And I often in my mind would say, yeah, I wonder how they would do on some of those level 4 yards or something. Could they walk in my shoe? And once again, I balanced the scales, whether they knew it or not. You know, we got to play these little tricks with ourselves and to get through it and not give up, because you know everything is tough. But I mean, that's what life is. We've been through worse.
The big old battleground test. It's the big old test.
Yeah. You know, we got to do what we got to do to get through it.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of my take. I know my little 2 cents on this transition, which you know, I'm dealing with the major transition scholars. We got to talk about that and those fears, and I don't want that fear to override that you know, that end game that's there waiting on you. Lawrence, we got to get to that day, man, where we can take over that thing, because that's a part of my dream too. I said we're educating the educational system, but I really would love to see us take over reentry, because I don't believe that law enforcement and you know, those types should be in control of reentry as well as incarceration at all. I think that it's a complete hypocrisy in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I think we're invested differently. We especially the ones that have done it successfully. You know, there was a time where they could say, well, you know, you probably have a good idea, but you're not educated. Okay, but now we can scratch that one off the list. We got a whole nation of folks that are educated too. Now, what's the next, you know, excuse you can come up with to deny the fact that we are better at that than you, and we know it better than you. We know it's more real to us.
I agree with that totally. You know, the reentry system for such a long period, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even, you know, after the, you know, up into the 2000s, was designed for those coming out of incarceration to fail. You know, once the quote war on drugs started, it was all about, let's get that revolving door, let's build as much as we can, let's build up this process around and around and around and around and around. So rehabilitation / reintegration / integration into society wasn't part of the equation. There were pieces and parts of the puzzle that were thrown out there, but they were always underfunded, over-administrated, and operated in general by people who didn't have a vested interest in their success. If, for example, if the formerly incarcerated successful community that we are, if we take over reentry, recidivism goes away.
Yeah. If that's the true intention. See, sometimes
and that's where that's where the perspective, the paradigm shift has to take place. You know, it's a money game. You know, there are two things that, you know, money players are all about. They're about getting more and keeping what they got. If they don't have to spend it, they see that as getting more and keeping what they got. Recidivism is a big cost. Granted, there's a whole lot of folks making a whole lot of money off of, you know, prisons and incarceration. but there's so much more money to be made off of productive social citizens who are benefiting not only themselves, but society as well. That's a much bigger pie, but a whole lot more money in it than just incarceration. No, we're talking 5% of the population, 25% with that are incarcerated. Well, what about that other 75%? What about that other 95%? Now, that's the piece of the pie I want. You know, let's look at this from a longer term perspective. You know, the amount of money that is spent to incarcerate a person. I'll use myself for example. My last 5 years of incarceration cost the state of California almost $500,000. Because A, I'm old, B, I was infirm, spent a whole lot of money trying to keep me healthy. Well, that $500,000, damn, you know, I can get 10 teachers for a career for $500,000. I can get a whole school built for $500,000. I can get the whole transitions program statewide, everyone funded through their bachelor's into their master's for that same amount of money versus just me.
Yeah. See, Lawrence, that's important. Looking at those numbers and asking those kind of hardline questions, that's important for us all to do all the time. I mean, take a look at like things that just don't make sense, hypocrisies and you know, when people tell you one thing, that's what definitely connects to the first thing that I fell in love with is sociology, because it asks those kind of hardline questions. It peels what they call the sociological imagination, peels back the surface level stuff and goes through that onion, you know, by layer and gets to some of the meat. I mean, even if you press like the hard line, what do we call them? Prison profiteers or incarcerators or whatever we want to call them. The people on that end, some of them, depending on who's in the room or how many places that you go to, you might get 4 or 5 different answers about what motivates them to do that. Some people are dead set on retribution. Prisons exist for retribution. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the punishment, eye for an eye type folks. And then some might be pressed to tell you deterrence. We're deterring people, you know, they exist to deter people from committing crime. You know, if you ask a whole nother section, they might agree on that. And then some might say incapacitation, just keeping the bad folks away from the good folks. And then you might run into some folks that actually get into, you know, rehabilitation. But it's just like, we can't even agree on why we're dumping these billions of dollars into these spaces, destroying people's lives and careers and families. And we can't even agree on why they exist or why we're dumping those $1 billion into those places. So that's our job, to press them, figure it out. If we're going to rely on these kind of systems so much, let's know why and all agree on that at least. You know, it's got to make sense. Sometimes that's our job too. But Lawrence, I definitely agree with that. It's economically infeasible.
Yeah, and
well, it appears to be economically infeasible. You know, yeah. When we look at economics, you know, our economic system, now we have people, especially within our peer group, holding down 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. Okay, why? Why do you need 3 jobs? Why does a single parent with 2 kids need 3 jobs to make rent and groceries? One job ought to be enough. If it's not, we have to address that part of the system. You know, I should be able to go to work within any profession, make my rent, make my groceries, and still have money left over at the end of the month. But there are so many people nationwide who can't do that. Rents are crazy. Now, I live in a 55 and over community. The average rent in my community for a 2-bedroom house is $2,800 a month. In order to afford that, you need to be making almost $6,000 a month just to get past a credit check.
Yeah.
Something's twisted, when the average Social Security check is $1,100. We have a lot of social issues to address, and within
for somebody.
this community, the transitions folks here and Project Rebound folks, we got the manpower, we got the brain power. Now, one of the things that I noticed that when I was, throughout my incarceration, there are not a whole lot of stupid people in prison. There are a lot of very, very intelligent people in prison. And a lot of us were in prison not because of what we did, but because of the choices that we made based on the information that we had to work with at the time. With transitions and with Project Rebound and the work that these students are doing, we're changing our options by learning that there are other things that we can do through educating ourselves. Damn, there I went again. I'm doing that professor shit again.
No, that's a good way to look at it. But I saw Martine, you were getting ready to pop in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, that, regardless of what, I don't know, era, generation, or whatever, when it comes to prison and reentry, the society we're reentering is the first thing we need to face, because the society that I reentered didn't want me in the first place. You know what I mean? That society pushed me away in the beginning. And so I think that what Professor Bell's talking about too is that I think that most, if not all, formerly incarcerated system impacted students I see in this space and throughout my 14 years of doing this work are solution-based. What do we do to change things? And for the folks who in the room who are feeling or who have stated some type of imposter syndrome, and I've said it before in this class, you already got the greatest education you're ever going to get, which is your own personal experience. That personal experience is what creates change, right? Whether it be addiction, you already got the experience in addiction. What would you like to see different? And then create that change, right? Or start to lead the charge to create the change. We're talented, we're smart, we're capable. I think sometimes the only thing we need is some belief in ourselves. Once we got that belief in ourselves, that we believe in ourselves and we believe in each other, this is how all these movements happen, right? And so I just wanted to say that because, the economic system is way bigger than us. The prison industrial complex, which I just did a presentation on last week, carceral capitalism, people are making money off of everything from handcuffs to restraint chairs to metal cages to the steel and concrete. All that stuff costs money. A cop rolls up, you got the lights, you got the badge, you got the paint on the car, you got the computer inside, all that stuff costs money. And somebody's got to flip that bill, right? And guess who their target is? People who are getting ready to go inside and people who just came from the inside out. So, we're at about 68 to 69% recidivism rate in California. When I got out of prison 14 years ago, it was almost damn near 77%. So we're, in a decade, we see a difference and we just need to keep working harder at it. You know what I mean? And so you've got the mindset, you've got the education. It may not be on paper yet, but I've heard so many people throughout my years who are street smart and got degrees from academia. That makes them double dangerous. You know what I mean? So, be prepared for that shit. because
Yeah,
that's
I can dig. That's power right there. I like that. That's double. Because I'm telling you what I said earlier about them realizing if people could walk in our shoes that might turn their nose up to us. There's not that many that can hang. Their experience is probably not going to be like ours. They probably wouldn't end up as strong or make it last as long without running into wrecks and all that stuff. So there's a lot to like what Martine is saying. That experience is rich on building character and all of that stuff. We just got to put the icing on the cake. This is a new level. Our network is getting ready to expand to where we can change the game, really. But we got to pay attention. We got to be in tune to it. And that's the key, because there is some work that some of us need to do, and that never ends. Working on ourselves never ends. That's the difficult stuff. There's some systematic stuff that we can probably fix easier than some of that internal stuff, that damage and that history that we need to work on and not deny. It's there, it's real, but we can move beyond it.
Yeah.
But that's really all my little 2 cents that I had to share with the team today. I really just appreciate hanging out with you, and I wish I could have been even in here earlier. It's just we just kind of plan it. So Martine, anytime and every time we get a chance to power hour, get together, and that's out of respect. I know he gets on my case, and I mean that with the utmost respect.
I know you do. Well, the cool thing is come the fall, I'll be teaching another transitions course. We got another group of formerly incarcerated students coming through at Miracosta College. So
okay.
I'll be bringing in, some of the students here to kind of give like a little, I think what's important is that we get to come in and do a little guest talk, you know what I mean? And those students who are new to the students who have been around for a long time, those are the folks that want to come in and inspire. So I'll be inviting you to that class too.
Okay. No, any and every time, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So
all of you, thanks for having me. And I want to see you on that big stage. We got a big celebrations to have for when you reach that spot, and I continue to root for you.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Okay. So before we end with Mr. Bell, just kind of keeping towards our traditions, I'd like to get 2 people to say a couple appreciations to him for him being here and enlightening us and give him a talk. Who would like to give appreciation to Professor Bell? Don't be shy now. Go ahead, Richie. Richie and Lucia. So we'll go Richie first, then Lucia.
Yeah, Mr. Bill, I just want to say that I appreciate the answers you gave me, your wisdom, your knowledge. Any experience is good experience, man, and I learned that, and I know you pretty much walked down the same path I did, and you got there, and I look up to that, and you caught my attention, and I was listening, and I was just taking it in, and I'm trying to learn from your experience and hopefully one day get there as well. So I just like to thank you for your time and your education, brother, and have a good rest of the day too.
Thank you, Richie, man, and I appreciate you, and welcome home once again. You got big things in your future, man. I see it already.
Thank you, brother.
All
right. Thank you, Richie. Lucia?
Just want to say thank you for coming and talking to us, giving us words of encouragement, knowing that we can do anything that's possible. And just sharing your experiences and sharing like that anything is possible, you know what I mean? Like there is a little fear that people maybe, or for me, that I won't be good enough, but like hearing what you have to say, like we can change this world, we can make this a better world. A lot of people see us like we're just gonna be back to where we were, jails or drugs, and we're not gonna change. But by doing education, we can make it something better,
right.
But thank you.
Thank you. You all are amazing. I appreciate it. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. You all have a great rest of your day, and much love to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Okay.
All right. All right, y'all. So I appreciate y'all participating in that conversation. Mr. Bell, Jason Bell has been incredible. Probably known him now about 4.5 years. And he is probably one of the most proactive men I know in reentry, right? We've done talks in areas around the country. We just did one in virtual for Nevada, right? Nevada is finally starting to take up this post-incarceration reentry stuff. And, we did a big talk with them in Nevada. So, yeah, he's very, very proactive and very caring. The one thing too, when I say that is that, the more you do education, the more you build this confidence around schools, the more you have the opportunity to go share your personal experience and your solution base. So, believe me, there's a lot that we can contribute. We just got to build that confidence, right? So, so with that being said, we're gonna wait for Dr. Chris Bickel. Oh, by the way, let me just say this too. Let's get some stuff out the way. Your paper 2 assignment, I put it in the assignments page. Some of y'all may have seen it or not. I did want to, because there was a couple people who was asking about, instead of doing a rewrite, can we do a new paper? And I said, yeah, you can do, if you want to do a new paper, you can. I do want to pay respects to folks who don't want to do a rewrite. There's a couple folks who wrote just want to write something new, and that's fine too. So if you want to write a new paper, you can. The assignment is up on the assignments page, and it's open, right? It's open now. So once again, whether you write a new paper or whether you write a rewrite, which some of y'all you should do the rewrite, just to put it out there. Regardless of what you do, you still can garnish an extra 5 points by working with somebody else. So we'll go Richie, Bree, then Jen.
Okay, yeah, you pretty much answered my question. I just want to know that was a new assignment for this week, and we're gonna get points on it.
No, that's for week 7. So you still have.
Yeah, okay, I did that.
We're in week 6 now, y'all.
Yeah. So we could redo it and get some more like extra credit points.
No, paper 2 is one of 2 things. Paper 2 is a rewrite of paper 1.
Okay.
That is updated with the good work. You can take the points you have now. If I do recommend though that if you didn't do your citations correct, your format, all that other stuff, do the rewrite, because I want you to learn how to write a paper, right? I mean, I think if anything, we're learning about the justice system in this class and all that stuff. But if there's one thing you can learn is how to write a paper, because writing is going to be important for so many classes you're going to enter in the fall, in the spring, and all the time. So if there's one thing you can get away and say, and I learned that from my mentor who's going to be in this class is, paper writing is super important. So you can rewrite the paper or write a new paper, but the format has to be there. I put up a sample paper in the assignments page for paper 2. There's a sample paper. There's access to Purdue OWL. No, not Purdue OWL. Skibble or something like that. There's another thing that actually breaks down like, hey, this should be the way you write your paper, right? So this is pretty basic information. But the most important thing is you're going to get 5 extra points if you work. Let's just say, Richie, you reach out to Jen, and the 2 of you work together on the paper. You put Jen's name underneath your name. You're going to get 5 points just for that. But I also will be checking in with Jen. Hey, did Richie work with you on this? And if she says no, I'm gonna be like, hell no. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I will be checking in on that. Not that y'all would play me, but I'm just saying. So go ahead, Bree.
Yes, I had asked I think it was last week or the week before, we talked about a guideline or rubric for the final project, and you said you were going to post something last Thursday.
Haven't posted it yet because I haven't got together with the team yet. I want to figure out exactly what it is. I promise you, it will be up by tomorrow. I will
Okay.
try to get together with the team to see what we want exactly for the final. No more. I know that it's going to be no more than a 5-minute presentation. It's going to be some PowerPoint slides. It's going to either be a very personal, like, this is me and reentry. Then you'll talk a little bit about reentry, then you'll share a little story about you and your reentry, or me and my addiction. Maybe you'll talk a little bit about, I don't know, addicts in the United States, right? Like so many people use certain type of drugs, and this is me and my experience coming out of addiction, or where you're at with that. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be something. It's going to be personal, and it's also going to be your personal experience with the injustice system or the justice system in one way or another, right? It also could be something like, I know that Bree, you're talking about wanting to pursue social work, right? Tell me why. You know what I mean? What was the deciding factor behind social work? But I do want some type of like understanding of the justice system within social work, right? Or within your experience, right? In your own personal narrative as to why you're picking social work. And so for everybody though, I'm going to be pretty strict on time, because 5 minutes it seems like a long time, but it's a very short time. But it's also like when you have 20 some odd people giving a 5-minute presentation, it takes a lot of time, because there's also question and answers after. Some people go over, you know what I mean? 5 minutes isn't just 5 minutes. It's usually like, with question and answers. So I'm not very good at just cutting people off, but I think I'm going to have to just cut people off if they start taking up too much time. You know what I mean? So we will figure that out, and I'll put something up. I'll put something up soon. By tomorrow, you'll have it. Thank you for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Jen?
Mine can wait. I saw that our guest joined, so if we maybe chat after.
Okay. Well,
Awesome.
okay. You sure?
Yeah.
No need to wait. Go ahead, ask the questions. I'm
Yeah,
cool, just kind of watching.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, Professor, I was working with a student, and mostly we were just going over citations and things like that. Would you want him to turn in that paper still, like the rewrite, and then do a second paper two, or a different paper two? Sorry, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. No, if he does
Okay.
rewrite, if the student you're working with does the rewrite, you don't have to worry about paper two, because the rewrite is paper two. But the other thing too, I don't just want you to rewrite the paper and give me the same information. I want you to expand on it. The other thing too, some of y'all wrote, this is a like a 4-page paper, so to speak, give or take, right? But some of y'all wrote like 7-8 pages, and that's cool. But I want you to learn how to be concise. Get to your point. Don't repeat things. Just get to your point, move on to the next thing, and learn to be very concise with your work, right? Because if you can say it, unless it's real good and it's like not repeating itself, then a 7-page paper is cool. But a lot of times if I read a paper and then I say, oh, well, you've already said this in paragraph 2, you've mentioned this in paragraph 4, you know what I mean? Like you can be a little bit more concise and to the point, right? So I want you not only just to be like, all right, I'm going to format it, use the right font, use the right text, all that other stuff. No, I want you to go through and see the content of your paper and the flow of it. And my mentor is in the room right now, so I'm being very careful what I'm saying. He's a master of writing papers, you know what I mean? But so I want you to be very concise. And I do think that one of the most important things is that you learn to cite your work, and you learn to be, you just gotta learn to be concise, because once again, going to the fall, going to the spring, paper writing is super important. And for sometimes professors are not lenient when it comes to paper writing, right? And a lot of us in this room are new to this game, and they're gonna have high expectations. Well, if you're in my class, then you better know what you're doing. You know what I mean? And some professors are not very lenient, nor are they very helpful either. Oh, it's in the rubric, pay attention to the rubric. for a lot of us, it's like, what the fuck's a rubric? You know what I mean? So, so let's work on that together. And also, once you work with somebody, if you want to send it to me for one over before you turn it in, that's fine by me too.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. My dear friend, mentor, and brother, Christopher Bickel's here, Dr. Christopher Bickel. I know he's going to say, call me Chris. But he's going to do a good presentation. He's going to do a bomb presentation, as he always does. But first, I want to give you an opportunity to take a short break, get some water, use the restroom, fill up your coffee cup. So I want to give you a 5-minute break. So I want you all back here, cameras on, 10:08. Oh, the 4 just changed, 10:09. 10:09, all right? If you don't need a break, you want to just kick it and hear some shit talking, like you can stay on. But 10:09, folks, 10:09. Let's come back, all right? What's up, Chris?
Hey, what's up, fool?
Hey,
My little Wi-Fi extender is off, so I'm on a little bit of internet, so just in case. I want to keep you posted on that, but I just prioritized it on my Wi-Fi, so hopefully we'll be all good.
Okay, did you send me something in the mail, by the way?
I haven't. Yeah, I got up a little too late, and so I've been going through the presentation. So, and then the Zoom thing needed to update. I hadn't done Zoom all summer, so I had to update that before I could get on.
Yeah, there's been a couple of updates. How did Lucy do last night?
She was good. But man, she slept with me last night, man. So she didn't roam the house. I was hoping to, but she looked at me and she was like, "Man, I want to go upstairs." I was like, "Come on up."
You softy, man. I do.
For those of you who don't know, Lucy's my dog. But yeah, man, the only thing, man, when she sleeps near me, man, and she has to like literally sleep near my back. Like I always try to turn over to get away from her, but she has to literally have contact with me all night. Like, man, come on, dog.
A lot of body.
She's gonna be downstairs tonight for sure.
Yeah, Nicholas wants to see your dog.
Where we
Show
at?
the dog. Show the dog.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for. Hold on.
It's not a little dog, y'all.
Hey, Lucy.
I'm looking forward to this.
Nicholas loves dogs like so much. Every time he sees a dog, he's like, "Hey, little pupper," to like random strangers all the time.
That's awesome.
Okay, they expect someone to come up and love their dog. Okay, just because I love dogs.
There's Lucy, y'all.
So this is Lucy.
What's up, girl?
I can see.
I can't see either.
You can't see her?
Okay, I see. She's so
He's
cute.
a pit bull. That's my
Look
favorite
at
kind
that
of
little
dog.
pup. Oh,
Oh, do you want to see the
he's
dog?
so cute.
Hold on. Oh, you can't
Thank
see
you
it.
so
Oh, he's
much
right
for
there.
showing your dogs.
Aw.
Say
You have
hi.
brightened my day tremendously.
Yeah, there he is.
Oh my God, that's
Oh, I
gorgeous.
know. What kind of pit bull is he?
Blue nose.
Yeah.
Blue
A
nose.
blue nose pit bull. I had
Yeah.
I had 4 pit bulls in my life, but I had 1 red nose pit bull.
Oh,
Oh,
she's
he's
great.
a beautiful dog, or she's a beautiful dog. I had
Someone-
4. I love dogs and I love pit bulls. They're so sweet and they're protectors.
The only thing is,
Mm.
she knows when I'm going to work because I come into this room and then I have to lock the door, so she always knows. So once she gets in here, she'll try to stay in here forever. But she's not the best student, so.
That is so cute. I love pit bulls. They're amazing.
She's, I grew up with Huskies, and so Huskies were always real
Okay.
independent, but
Yeah.
she
Yeah,
loves,
me
she
too. I
loves,
grew up with Huskies.
Really, I
Man,
grew up with pit bulls. Oh wow. You know what the
Hey,
thing
but-
about pit bulls? Yeah. No, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they're really smart. They're smart.
Mhm.
They're very handsome dogs too. Like their faces are handsome. You know, they have really nice shape in their faces. They're really good dogs.
Yeah, we've been able to train her really well with treats. She loves treats, and so she learns really quickly. But yeah, I just absolutely love her. I'm used to Huskies who are a little bit more independent, but I love the fact that she's always got to be near you. And so when she knows I'm going to work, she'll immediately start picking up her toys and trying to get me to play to keep me from going to work, which isn't the best as far as getting my work done. But I love
Yeah. And you know what? They will protect you, and they know how to fight. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very loyal.
She's very small, but like, I play with the rope with her, and she, even from a puppy, she was hanging from a rope. She could literally with just her jaws.
They're my favorite dogs, to be honest. I mean, I like little dogs. I like cute little cockapoos. Like I like those kind. But when it comes to like, bigger dogs, pit bull all the way down.
Yeah. I absolutely love her. You get to that point and I get anxiety and stuff like, what if something happens to her? What if she's able to dig her way out of the yard? What if, and all these things. So, but she's my baby.
What's her name?
Lucy.
Oh, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Hey, there's the terror right there.
He's a little terror. I would worry more about him than Lucy, you know what I mean?
Although sometimes, I'm wrestling with Lucy and I look at her and her jaws and her teeth and I'm like, why am I wrestling with this dog? This dog could kill me.
All right, y'all, it's 10:09. Let's start coming back.
Hey, Martine, I'm gonna try to share my screen just to get everything going so we can let people file in. It might take me a little bit here.
Okay.
All right, can everybody see that screen?
I can. Everybody good? All right, got a couple thumbs up, so we're good.
Okay. And then, all right, now the only thing is, I don't think I'm able to, let me see if I can do a slideshow here. All right, how's that?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna adjust my screen here so I can try to see everybody at the same time of doing the presentation.
If somebody raises their hands, I'll be able to see it, so I'll be able to share with you. Usually goes to the top of my list.
For some reason though, it's not letting me go to my other screen here. Hopefully this works. I can't adjust the. Okay, hold on. Let me get out of here for a second. I can't see my, so I've got two screens, but I can't see my arrow on the other one, so I'm not able to adjust anything. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Y'all talk because you make me nervous, so go ahead and have your conversations while I'm doing this.
Dr. Bickel, make sure you have extending your monitor rather than just mirror.
Okay, let me go here, open display preference. Yeah, let me see.
Once we get started, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just do a little introduction to you, Chris, briefly. But I think I shared with you, or I did share with you last week that Dr. Bickel was going to come in, or Chris was going to come in, and I shared with you the importance of a person like Chris, right? Chris is, I met him probably, I was less than a year out of prison. We met at just randomly at some conference down here in San Diego. And, he did a presentation, I did a presentation, and, I introduced myself to him. And ever since then, we've become close. He's been a really strong supporter of my education, been a mentor, a friend, and a brother, and just somebody that I really look up to. And so I say that to say that as soon as you get the opportunity you get to meet somebody who, you know, will support you through your academic career and other places, right? Mentors are super important. So I'm excited. You know, he presents he's presented in every transitions class we've had. He even taught our very first transitions at Miracosta 2016, 2017 time, and really cares about our population and works not only in his research and his work, but also the way he teaches about incarceration, formerly incarceration, addiction, addicts, just the all the shit that the United States has thrown at people like us. I mean, Chris is very critical about the system, and it's a perfect person to have in your corner. So with that being said, you know, I don't know if you're ready, Chris.
Nah, I'm still going through, man. I'm mirroring it right now, but it's not. I'm trying to get it so I can see the class and do the presentation at the same time, which is normally what it always does. And for some reason, it's not.
Do you mind sharing your screen, Dr. Bickel, really quick?
Yeah, but the problem is when I share my screen, I can't move the cursor.
I can help you troubleshoot it. Like if you your screen and pick the option that says the word screen.
Okay, so but I've got two screens. So which one do you want to see?
The main one.
Okay, desktop here. All right, can you see it?
Yeah, and then you're gonna get a pop-up on your screen right now.
Oh shit. How the fuck are you doing that?
There you go.
All right.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah, don't trust Big Brother.
Okay, can you click on the settings? Because sometimes this thing glitches and it won't let me do anything.
Yeah, I've got it. It's open and my display preferences is open. So it's right there. And then this is my second screen here.
Okay, there it is. Did it work now?
Okay, yeah, let me try. Yeah, see, I keep coming back to this screen and it's not letting me go to my, oh, there's my cursor. All right, so let's go here. Here.
Did it let you do it now?
Let me check. Problem is I can't see anybody. All right, how about stop remote controlling my screen here, and I'm gonna try to go on there.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
All right, let's try that. Okay, now I can see folks. And we'll go here to the slideshow. All right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right, and let me, yeah, the problem is here, I can't, oh, there we go. There, that works now. All right, so I knew there's gonna be a little glitch. I always prepare for this, but I do like to see each and every one of you on the screen. Before I get started, are you finished, Martine, by the way?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I could hear some more compliments if you got some. But no,
I've got plenty.
Again, I appreciate Martine, man. Martine is a brother of mine. I consider him as part of my council of elders. I think everybody should have a council of elders. These are people that I have grown up with, that I've become a better human being with. I've got a group of about 8 people that whenever I go through problems, I always consult. They advise me. And for me, that was very important because I grew up without much family connection. And when you grow up without much family connection, you realize the importance of building your own family. And Martine is family. He's a brother of mine. And watching him over the last 13 years now inspires me to become a better person. You know, for those of you who haven't ever walked with Martine, I can remember one of the first times I brought him up to Cal Poly where I used to teach, and I walked across the grass and Martine's like, "Hey dude, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm walking across the grass. I'm making a little shortcut." And he's like, "Man, shit's live. You can't walk on the grass like that. And I think that's a great story of how much respect Martine has for life, and the love he shows for life. You know, not just human beings, which of course that goes without saying, but his love for animals and his love for life in general, and his love for this planet. And so it's absolutely an honor. And I've always told Martine, any class he ever teaches, I will always be there whenever he needs me to. And so one of the things that I want to do in this presentation is I want you to get this historical understanding. And please, please, please interrupt. Anytime you've got a question, it doesn't matter if I'm mid-sentence, your questions are probably important and other students probably have those same questions. So always interrupt me. Can I ask how many of you have heard about the controversy about critical race theory? Okay, so what have you heard? Go ahead and jump in on the conversation.
Don't be shy, folks.
One of the things is I'm great at meditating, so I'll meditate here until somebody jumps in. Even Lawrence, I saw you had your thumb up. What have you heard about the controversy with critical race theory?
It's becoming a political issue again instead of a social or educational issue. You know, it's powerful people are once again trying to control our information. They're trying to control our education and how we see things only from their perspective. And that just, you know, it's got me all twisted up too, you know, because with any type of critical thinking, be it critical race theory, be it, you know, however you want to label it. When somebody tells me I can't know something, that I can't have access to information, oh, hell no. Now, historically speaking, if we go back in human history, especially the more dramatic human history, power and control is all based solely on power and control of information. By controlling what information you have, a good example is the prison system. Okay, once you're in the inside, the administration controls what access you have to information and what information you have access to. They are, you know, players of propaganda, players of, well, he said, and the group this and that group that, and will feed information and misinformation to the population, to free staff, to custody that are in conflict. They'll tell custody one thing and tell administration something else, and tell the population a third story, none of which are actually bound in reality, but it keeps everybody in turmoil.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say that's exactly what they're doing with critical race theory.
Exactly.
And it drives me crazy. Critical race theory, if you like this presentation is based in critical race theory. And part of the idea is, if we want to get past racism in the United States, you have to go back to the root of it. You have to understand the root of where racism comes from. And so that's one of the things I'm going to do today. So when you hear Fox News or any of those places talk about the dangers of critical race theory, I want you to remember this presentation and then see if this presentation is dangerous. I think it's absolutely essential to look at our history. For me, in the longest, I got into this work about 24 years ago now. And I started going and doing a lot of volunteer work at juvenile detention centers. And one of the things that I always saw at juvenile detention centers is, well, everybody, kind of like what Lawrence was saying, hey, the staff and administration is saying juvenile justice is about this one thing. And they were always saying, hey, it's about rehabilitation. It's about helping young folks. But then when I looked at the actual operation of that institution, none of it was about rehabilitation. A lot of it was about warehousing, and even more of it was even worse than warehousing, because one of the things I felt that they were doing in juvenile justice is that they were preparing young folks for the penitentiary. And one of the saddest things later is I would be teaching at Lompoc Federal Penitentiary with about 40 men. And I asked all of the men, and so many of the men in there had done time in juvenile justice. And so I asked them, like, how did that affect you? And a lot of the men said, you know what? Nobody should go through that experience, but I'm glad I did because it prepared me for here. He's like, hey, sometimes I look at some of the people who are locked up in here with me and they didn't have juvenile justice. So when they come in here, it's all fresh and new and they have a hard time adapting. But for me, I went through the juvenile justice system, so I kind of felt prepared for this. Now, isn't that a fucked up thing that we create these institutions that cost about $85,000 a year to house a young person? And all that institution is doing is preparing people for the penitentiary. And so I wanted to know, how the fuck did we get here? And so in order to understand that, we got to start looking back at our past. And so my presentation today is from plantations to prisons. I want to show you that historical transition from how we got to the prison system that we have today. And please jump in here when I'm going to be asking some questions as we go through, but jump in here. What do you see in this picture here?
Sharecroppers.
Yeah, and look at the age. What age do you think these young folks are?
Somewhere around 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, we're looking 9, 10 years old. Some as young as 8. And they're already putting them out working in the fields. This is part of the convict leasing system. So it means these youngsters have been arrested. They go to the local sheriff. The local sheriff, who is oftentimes run by the Ku Klux Klan in the South, then leases them back out to the former plantations that their parents were freed from. And this is around 1920. So, you know, this looks like slavery, but it's the reinvention of slavery under the convict leasing system. So we go from here to here. Anybody know what this one is? This isn't a colorized photo. This is Angola Prison in Louisiana today. So you can absolutely see this same prison that looks just like a plantation that is in operation today. And when you go and look at Angola Prison, you'll see that almost everybody working in the fields is Black, and the overseers who are on the horses are white. It's a very similar picture to what we see here. And I want to know how we got from this transition here. You know, I want to know how we got from this to here. It doesn't look like that much of a transition. I want to know, and if you look in the United States, a lot of the prisons in the South were actually former plantations. And so right after the end of Emancipation Proclamation, right after the end of the Civil War, you saw a lot of those plantations immediately turn to prisons. And so how did we get here? And I want to make this clear, and I think it's important to understand this in our history. We have never had an equal system of justice. And, you know, United States, we always talk about our founders and equality and all of that, but we never had an equal system of justice in the United States. There has always been a different set of rules, not based off of what you did, but based off of who you are. So if you're Latino in the Southwest, there's a whole different set of regulations and laws that only apply to you. A lot of people, we always talk about segregation in the Southeast of African Americans and whites, but the same thing was happening in the Southwest. And so we have these things, especially in the Southeast, called the slave codes. And they created a separate system of justice based off of who you are. If you were Black and you looked at a white person wrong, you could be beaten. You could be killed. And there is absolutely nothing you could do because you didn't have access to the courts. It was perfectly acceptable for hundreds of years of this country's history for white folks to kill Black folks with absolutely no punishment. And they also had these other things, you know, you could be executed for assault upon a white person, spitting upon a white person. That was grounds for execution. And there were a lot of severe punishments on the plantation. And these punishments were designed to make sure that you always had this exploitable system of labor on the plantation. And you can see here on the side, this is an actual auction leaflet. And this is exactly how people would be auctioned off. So you can kind of look here and it lists a number of people. Robert Bagley, he's 20 years old and he's a good house servant. William Bagley is 18-year-old, they're brothers, and he's a laborer. So they can oftentimes be sold away from the family to plantations in different states. And so they would go down and list. And again, the kind of punishments were especially brutal. You have to keep in mind that when we think about our police force and our prison system, The very first police force in the Northeast was designed to control white immigrant labor. You know, you had a lot of Irish, you had a lot of Italians who were treated differently in the factories and oftentimes exploited for 14 hours a day. Well, what happens when those white immigrant groups start to rebel and say, hey, we want better working conditions? Well, you develop a police force that controls them. In the South, the first police force was designed to catch runaway slaves. So people who were running towards their freedom, you had this group of kind of working class white folks who would gather as a police force and go try to catch people. So you have to keep in mind, if you want to understand why we have so much police killings today, it dates back to our history. The very first police force in the Northeast was designed to catch runaways, designed to kind of control immigrant labor. In the South, it was designed to catch runaway slaves. And even if you go into California, our very first police force in California was called the California Rangers. And they were actually convened to catch Joaquin Murrieta. Joaquin Murrieta was somebody who, you know, prior to US taking Mexico's land, he actually owned quite a bit of land. And when immigrant groups came to California, they took a lot of Latino land. This was because of Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo said, hey, we're taking Mexico's land, but any people from Mexico who are now living in the United States, you now have citizenship. But that treaty was never actually listened to because people were treated differently. And so Joaquin Murrieta's land was taken. His brother was lynched. His wife was raped. And Joaquin Murrieta says, fuck this shit. We're getting a band of people together and we're going to go back and we're going to be Robin Hoods. And so he became this Robin Hood-like figure who went back and said, hey, you can't take my land, we're taking it back. California didn't take too kindly of that, especially whites in California. And so they convened the California Rangers, the very first police force in California, and they went after Joaquin Murrieta. And when they caught him, they decapitated him. And then they showed his head in various cities across the state of California as a way of telling Latinos, try to come against us, and this is what will happen to you. This is the history of policing. In the history of our prisons, the very first prison in the United States was actually this picture right here. And this was a prison that was located on a plantation. So if you violated the slave master, they could put you in here, especially under brutal conditions. This right here is one of the torture devices that they would use. This is something that would fit around your head, usually here. Sometimes they have another loop around here. And these poles are 3 feet long. And at the end of each pole, you see those steel balls. Those are 14 pounds each. So they would fit this onto somebody's head for 3 months at a time, for 6 months at a time. You have to sleep in this, you have to work in this, and this would be a form of punishment. So let's say you broke a garden tool. Put this form of torture on your head to make sure that you don't break another garden tool again. You know, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that there's a lot of resistance on the plantations. Sometimes it led to full-scale rebellions, but other times people resist by clever ways. One was destroying property. You know, it's much harder to work if you don't have any tools. And so a lot of sabotage that people would do. Crazily enough, when I first started working in juvenile detention centers, I saw the very same tactics that enslaved people would use on the plantation. I saw that very same tactics being used in juvenile detention centers. So young kids, when they'd be put on solitary confinement for 5 days at a time, would start to flood their cells. They would start to destroy property. And that property, once they destroy that property, they get more time for that. But that very same kind of resistance that you saw on plantations is alive and well in our prisons. It's alive and well in our juvenile detention centers. But going back to these slave codes, you can kind of see here the forms of torture that they would use. Here is a free man who was actually modeling some of the torture devices that would be used on the plantations. I mean, they even had forms of torture. What do you do if a pregnant woman violates the slave codes? They had solutions for this. And one of the common practices that they would do is they would dig a hole for the belly and then have the person lay flat, and then they would whip them on their back. You could not have a more brutal regime than the institution of slavery in the United States. But it is this regime that actually led to the very formulation of our prison system. So, okay, so you've got the slave codes, and then you get the Emancipation Proclamation. The 13th Amendment gets signed around 1865. And the 13th Amendment says this: neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, wherever the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. In our history books, in our high schools, they oftentimes tell us that the 13th Amendment, was the amendment that freed the slaves. But if you read this, did it really free people? What's the big exception here?
Unless you've committed a crime.
Yeah. And so what you see right here, 1865, they move from the slave codes, because you can't have it, slavery is supposed to be abolished. They move from the slave codes to what are called the black codes. And they created a whole system of rules that only apply to black folks in the South. And has anybody worked in prison? Anybody worked in prison in this class? If you have, tell me what your pay was in prison.
13 cents.
Okay, Martine, 13 cents, but we got a minimum wage law. That should at least be $7.25. So how did they get away with paying you 13 cents?
Ooh.
Go ahead, Lawrence.
With the Prison Industry Authority, they by definition pay minimum wage. However, everything above and beyond the 95 cents that you take home is used to cover your health care, your housing, your food. All of that is taken out of your minimum wage allocation for your payments every day.
Yeah. And if they tried to do that, if you're working for, let's say, a restaurant outside of prison and that restaurant tried to do the same shit, you could actually go after them. You could sue that restaurant. But in prison, it's commonplace. And again, it dates back to this 13th Amendment. Slavery is allowed for those who have been convicted of crimes. This is why you can see people still working in the plantations in Angola prison. So keep this in mind. The 13th Amendment actually codified slavery for those who have been convicted of crimes. So the South had this ingenious and perverse way of dealing with the emancipation of people. They created what was called slavery by another name. And they created initially the Black Codes. These were in existence from 1865 to 1866, but it was a set of rules that only applied to Black folks. And so if you were homeless, you could be locked up. If you gathered in groups of 4 or more people, you could be locked up. If anybody knows anything about gang injunctions, they have the same laws. So, a lot of the gang injunctions date back to these Black codes. And so even if you were unemployed, you could be arrested. Now think about this. People were just freed from the plantation. They didn't have jobs. Nobody was hiring. White folks especially weren't hiring at that time because they wanted slave labor. They didn't want free labor. And so most people who were Black after the end of slavery, they were unemployed. They didn't have a home. And it led to what you saw in 1865, whereas the plantation used to hold Black folks. Now, 1865, 1866, they turned the plantation into the prison. So now you get this massive incarceration of Black folks, especially young folks. Like I showed you, that picture of people who are 8, 9 years old. And so all of a sudden, the prisons went from being almost all white to all Black. And a lot of historians call this the return of slavery by another name. And I'm going to give you an example of a Mississippi Black Code. And let's see how many of us actually violate this. All rogues and vagabonds, idle and dissipated persons, beggars, jugglers, persons practicing unlawful games or plays. So if you play cards, if you play dominoes or any of those things, people who run away, persons who neglect their calling or employment, misspend what they earn, do not provide or support for themselves or their families or dependents, and all other idle and disorderly people, including all who neglect lawful business, shall be considered vagrants, and upon conviction thereof shall be fined not exceeding $100 for all accruing costs and be imprisoned at the discretion of the court. So all the southern states, what they did is, hey, and most of us, if you look at this, I know for sure I'm sometimes idle. I actually juggle. I could be arrested for these. And what they did is they created laws that make it so that you can almost arrest all Black folks. Now, again, these don't apply to white folks. It only applies to Black folks. So if you see anybody walking on the streets, they are an arrestable body. And so people would then be put into the local prisons. Now, the local sheriff, who was oftentimes run by the Ku Klux Klan in the South, would then say, oh, we've got all these people. We will lease them back out to the plantations. We will lease them to the mines. We will lease them to the roadway crews. And this became worse than slavery because even under slavery, the people who invested and bought human beings, they didn't want them to die. But under the convict leasing system, if you own a mine and somebody dies in your mine, move them out, bring somebody else in from prison. You don't pay for this stuff, so you don't care. So the death rates after slavery of Black folks were actually tremendous in the South. You saw a lot of young people dying in the mines. You saw a lot of people dying on the roadway crews. And much of the Southern infrastructure was built by this, what was called the convict leasing system. And so you go from this convict leasing system and they start producing railroads. You can see it here, but this looks just like slavery to me. You get your working class white folks who serve as the overseers and Black folks as the laborers. And again, nobody's paid here because they're, so-called convicts paying off the fines from the court. Now they say, hey, $100 fine, but $100 fine in 1865 was impossible to pay. And so even then you go to the roadway crew and they say, oh, you don't have any tools? Well, we will lease them, but you'll have to pay those back. And you won't be free from this until you pay for everything. And so essentially it locked people into forced labor. And again, Black codes then went from, the North came in and said, hey, you're trying to reinvent slavery. We're not going to allow it because the North was occupying the South at that time. We're not going to allow this. But then comes along 1876 and the North says, hey, we're out. And they had what was called the Hayes-Tilden Compromise. They made a compromise. The North said, we will leave if you do this. The South comes in and says, hey, we won't reinstitute slavery. The North leaves, but once the North leaves, they move from the Black codes to Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow laws would be in existence until the 1960s in the United States. And some would argue that they're still in existence to this day in different forms. But the Jim Crow laws were a reinvention of the Black codes. And it said, hey, if you're Black, you can't sit in the front of the train. You can't sit in the front of the bus. If you're Black, you can't attend the same schools as white folks. If you're Black, you're subject to a whole new set of laws within the criminal justice system. If you're Black, you can't argue in the courts. So you can't defend yourself in the courts. And so again, what you saw is this massive transition from the plantation to prisons. And you could see here much of the Southern infrastructure from the mines to the roadways. Here again, you see another road crew to the railroads was all built by Black slave labor after the end of slavery. So this was all through the convict leasing system. It was a reinvention of slavery. And so we've got this kind of a system here, and you can see much of that Southern infrastructure. Now, one of the things that always trips me out is you don't remember past, you're doomed to repeat it. And I think we've done the exact same thing with our Black codes. And now they're called gang injunctions. Luckily, there have been a lot of protests against gang injunctions, and we're starting to fight against them, and they're starting to disappear to some degree. How many of you are familiar with gang injunctions? Speak out.
Don't be shy, y'all. There's extra credit attached to this.
I'll talk about it. I was a gang member at once, but I'm not no more. But my neighborhood didn't have the gang injunction, but I'm familiar with a lot of neighborhoods down here in San Diego that do got the gang injunction, and unfortunately, it's kind of sad how like a couple of times I was just chilling with like a couple of my homeboys, and we were just going to like a simple party with no guns, no drugs, nothing. We're just trying to have like a good time, and then we got pulled over, and like just because I was a documented gang member and he was as well, they arrested us. They towed the car, and I did a parole violation for a year straight just for being around another gang documented person. You know what I mean? But I know the gang injunction does that for the whole community, the whole neighborhood as itself. You know what I mean? Whether they're documented or not.
Yeah. And so what you're telling me is one of that rules that I talked about with the Black codes applied to you. It can't even be called a mistake because it's an injustice. But the injustice that happened to you because you gathered in groups of more than 4 people.
Yeah.
That's a law that was created under under the Black codes. So we got these black codes, and now we call them gang injunctions. And they have a whole list of rules, like you can't wear certain clothes. Like a lot of those in San Diego, if you wear Padres gear, now that's a violation of the gang injunction. You could be sent back to jail for that. If you wear certain colors, violation of the gang injunction, you could be sent to, back to jail for that. And the punishment for violating a gang injunction, even though it's not technically a crime, it's a violation of a civil order, is anywhere from 3 to 6 months in jail. And then if you get a parole or probation violation from that, it could be even longer. And so what you have is these kind of laws that only apply to those members who have been identified as gangs. But if we look at it in California, who do you think they identify as gang members? It's disproportionately Black and Latino in Southeast. And so again, these kind of modern day Black codes are now called gang injunctions. And Martine, we could bring you in here because I know you have some specialized knowledge on this because you fought the Santa Barbara gang injunction. But in the proposed Santa Barbara gang injunction, this is a map of it. And if you actually map the racial breakdown of the city, you'll find that they provided gang injunctions in the only Latino neighborhoods of the city. So, you got safety zone A and safety zone B. Those are the predominantly Latino areas of the city. And so I wanted to show you a kind of brief little video of a young man who was put on a gang injunction to show you how similar they are to the Black codes.
You want to wait 1 second? I know Max.
Yeah.
System, they have us over a barrel.
Hey Max, we can barely hear you.
Well, because they know we'd rather be out of our cell working at all. So we'd probably work for free if they'd let us, just to get out of our cell.
Okay, so you're kind of breaking up, but you were talking about the importance of wanting to get out of that cell, and so that people would even want to work for free just to get out of that cell. And that's that kind of form of institutional slavery in a sense. Let's create the conditions that are so harsh, lock people up in a little 6x8 cell so that, they'll want to be exploited when they get out. And again, I'm not saying, we don't need to have work programs within prison, but if we have work programs, we need to pay people as human beings, not this 12 cents, 13 cents, and if you work your way up to 50 cents an hour. And that's the kind of conditions. You create conditions that are so harsh that people want to get out of the cell. So we need those work programs. But one of the things we know is that people who end up going to prison, most have a salary of less than $10,000 before they go in. A lot of people are in prison because they're poor. This is especially true for a lot of single mothers out there. We know the number one reason single mothers go to prison are things like continuous shoplifting, writing bad checks. Well, why are people shoplifting? Why are people writing bad checks? Because they have families to feed. And so a lot of the reasons people go up into prison is because they're poor. And so what prison does by paying people 12 cents an hour is it keeps people poor. And that's the kind of condition. You make the condition so horrific that people would even want to, just to get out of that cell, to get out of that kind of mental confinement that is the cell. We have these job programs so that you can get out. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have some kind of job programs in the prison system. I myself am a prison abolitionist, so I don't think those prisons should exist in the way that they do in the first place. But if we do have a prison, we need to be able to occupy and give people those skills so that when they come out in society, but pay people as human beings. Don't pay people slave wages. And again, I think that these kind of connections between what slavery looked like in the 1800s compared to what gang injunctions look like today, I think that connection is worth exploring. I'm going to show a little bit of the video here.
This is probably one of the most special places to me in the whole city. Maybe because many childhood memories happened over here.
Brian Carreño grew up just down the street from the Wilcox property on Santa Barbara's Mesa. The 21-year-old has spent a lot of time at his refuge recently after learning he's been labeled, quote, one of Santa Barbara's 30 most serious gang members in the city's proposed gang injunction.
The first thing that came on my mind was, why me? Why me out of all people? Never in my life have I been charged with a gang-related crime, which also makes it very ironic that I would be on this list.
a list the police department describes as the most dangerous gang members in Santa Barbara.
Ours is focused on identifying 30 individuals who we believe has caused us basically the most grief in terms of gang, in terms of recruitment, and in terms heavily on crime.
Carreño looked to the official court documents for answers. The incident cited in his case happened in 2006, when Carreño was 16 years old and he was the victim of a stabbing.
What did I do to deserve this kind of punishment? Where it's to the point where I can't even walk and I can't take my daughter to a city park anymore. How's that supposed to work?
The police department emphasizes no juveniles are on the list, but the 21-year-old says what isn't told is the incident listed was when he was a juvenile.
What we like to call a limited injunction that is specific to 30 individuals, all adults, no juveniles.
Carreño admits he's had to mature since his teen years. He's now an English major at Santa Barbara City College. Youths in the media asked a classmate if Carreño came across dangerous or intimidating.
Not at all. What? No. No. I come from the place where you got to duck and dodge because people get shot every day. Not that much happens like that up in Santa Barbara. And if they have any type of gang injunction in Santa Barbara, I'm sorry to say, but the politicians must have lost touch with who actually is living here.
Carreño worries the gang injunction could jeopardize his education.
I'm restricted to come here. I don't know how that's supposed to work for me if I'm a student here. How are they going to restrict me from coming to school?
The nearly 50-page injunction complaint has 16 paragraphs of restrictions Carreño would have to follow, including staying away from the Boys and Girls Club, a place the aspiring musician spends a lot of time making music, with the Notes for Notes organization.
So how am I supposed to focus on my music and focus on my salvation if I can't even get there? That's where I just find it wrong.
A mentor for Notes describes Carreño's music as heartfelt.
His writing is really great. He's very interested in creating the best possible songs he can. And all the times I've seen him here, he's been completely dedicated with his time. He's in the zone, he's focused, he's writing, he's rehearsing and recording and totally in the zone. It's great.
Carreño's known at the music studio for working well with others.
Yeah, he works great with others. I feel totally comfortable with him. I saw him downtown. He stopped and said hi to me. I was with my family. I was like, yeah, that's good. I like that. That's a good quality you see in somebody. Like they see me actually out and about and they stop and said hello. Brian did that. That means a lot to me.
And the free recording studio means fulfilling a dream for Carreño.
This is a pivotal point in my life. This is where I'm going to decide what I'm going to do for the next 50 years of my life, right here in this place. So for the law to just keep me away from here is just, it's mind-boggling to me.
A pivotal point in which Carreño hopes the truth will prevail and the gang injunction won't.
I don't think I'll let it get to me as bad. I always just keep my head up and just keep moving forward. Prove everybody wrong, you know what I mean? Actions speak louder than words. So anybody can say this or write it on a piece of paper, but if I can show and prove that I'm way totally different than that, and I will, best believe I will, that's the way I can redeem myself.
So to actually recap here, this is the actual gang injunction of why they said he was on the gang injunction. Brian Carreño, AKA Sneaky, is a known East Side gang member. Carreño has had numerous law enforcement contacts while associating with East Side gang members, has East Side gang tattoos on his body, has made admissions to the Santa Barbara Police Department of his East Side gang membership, and has been contacted by law enforcement while in possession of gang writings and wearing gang attire. Notice here, they don't say he's been arrested. He was never arrested. And then it goes, on October 13th, 2006, Carreño was stabbed during a gang fight between East Side members and West Side gang members. So he's a victim of a stabbing, but yet that puts him on a gang injunction? Again, they say contacts with law enforcement. You know how many fucking contacts I've had with law enforcement? Before I hit 18, I had 13 different incidences where law enforcement contacted me. They didn't arrest me, but they contacted me. And when you grow up in certain neighborhoods, it's guaranteed that you're going to have contacts with law enforcement. It doesn't mean you've done anything. I routinely was stopped by law enforcement, frisked, and then let go, oftentimes because who I was with. And here, and again, this is, you know, everything that they do to put him on this gang injunction, which is, again, a different set of rules, not based off of what you did, but who you are. And they say, hey, he's been associating with other gang members. Well, I associated with a ton of gang members throughout my life. Does that mean that I have to be subjected to a whole different set of laws? And so you can kind of see right here, they're creating a separate system of justice, not based off of what you did, but based off of who you are. And California made a huge
Oh, did he freeze?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's he'll come back in a second. He's probably freaking out right now because Chris is very he have a little freak out. But I do want to share because you know I'm from Santa Barbara, right? And this whole gang injunction thing happened at the time that I had already been doing activism and organizing. This came at a time when I was already at that time when the gang judge came, actually Brian Carreño, and I have to say this because when I was doing drug and alcohol treatment in 2009, I got my drug and alcohol counseling certification. I was doing drug and alcohol. Brian Carreño was one of my clients, right? He was one of my youngsters I was working with. As you know, he got busted for some weed and possession. He had to go to treatment, and so I got to know Brian really, really well, right? And you know, he's a good young man. I remember when his daughter was born. It was when they put him on the list for the gang injunction, we didn't understand why, but we fought that gang injunction. I don't know what Chris is going to say about it, but you know, having a finally of like right mind and right organizing and activism skills, we fought that. Usually a gang injunction will come to the courts and within less than 30 days it's signed and it's implemented, right? Because nobody fights them. You know, it costs a lot of money to fight them. Everybody's got to have their own attorney. The neighborhood's practically got to have their own civil rights attorney because it's a civil suit, not a criminal suit, right? But we were able to raise enough money to fight that gang injunction. And Santa Barbara, we were one of the first cities ever known to actually fight and defeat a gang injunction, right? And that set the market now. Gang injunctions right now are actually being taken off of the list, right? Gang injunctions are known not to deter crime. They're known not to really actually stop things from happening. And so when, you know, we put our best foot forward, a bunch of community organizations and people came together and we fought that gang injunction, we actually defeated it. And we made it known to, you know, we used the ACLU, all kinds of whatever organization or apparatus we had to actually fight it. We fought it. And like I said, we won. And every time Chris shows that video of Brian Carreño too, just because a gang injunction was defeated doesn't mean the cops stopped harassing people, right? They acted like there was a gang injunction, and we actually ended up doing a cop watch. And eventually, and I have to say this, Brian Carreño was eventually killed by law enforcement just in 2016. His life was taken by law enforcement. And his dad actually called the cops to get him some support, some help, because he was on meth. He was having an episode, psychosis, but instead of getting him the help, they ended up killing him. And so I got to say that just because I love that young man. And as I said, I worked with him when he was in treatment. He was my client, and a good kid, good young man. And he had an inspiring future with music. He was very talented. So, but anyways, going back to Jason Bell's conversation, right? With my personal experience growing up in the neighborhood, drugs, alcohol, violence, going to prison, all this personal experience, when they came out and they said, we're going to fight this gang injunction, I already had a lot of the ends that I needed. And we organized a great team of people and we all defeated the gang injunction. So to go for you all, you already got what it takes to create social change, right? So I see that Chris is logged back in, so I'll turn it right back over to him. And we kind of knew that was going to happen, right?
Yeah, and sorry about that. The fucked up thing is I was sitting there talking. I was giving the best lecture of my life, and I started looking at everybody, and everybody's all frozen. I'm like, fuck, I wonder how that shit was going on for. But so we were able to get through. Y'all were able to see the whole entire video?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And thanks for doing that, Martine. We were kind of prepared for that. I think it was a good time for me to actually get cut off there because that's your expertise in that area. But, the idea of that and showing that video is here's this young man who is being kept from public parks. He can't go to any events in Santa Barbara. He can't gather with any of his friends. He can't even go to some of the schools and take his daughter to school because they've forbidden him from being there. And if you can't see the similarities between the black codes and gang injunctions, they're absolutely incredibly similar. And in California, we not only have that, but we also have the Cal Gang database. And right now it's been put on hiatus for a minute, but I want to kind of explain the Cal Gang database because there was somebody earlier who talked about being an identified gang member. Well, how do they identify you as a gang member? And I always encourage folks, never ever tell the police, school resource officers, if you are in a gang, keep that shit quiet to them. Because this is what they do. They have a series of questions that they go up and ask people, sometimes in schools, sometimes when the police stops you on the road. And they say, hey, if the person admits a gang membership or association, they're a gang member. And then it goes on to, hold on here. And for some reason, I'm not, oh, there we go. Admits gang membership or association, observed associating with known gang members. Anybody know what's wrong with that? If you got gang members who are family and you're just hanging out with family, then they can identify you as a gang member too. Has tattoos indicating gang membership. So if you've got anything in Old English, if you've got your area code, they say, hey, that's gang membership. Wears gang clothing or symbols. I wear Dickies all the time. Will they consider Dickies gang clothing? Is in a photograph with a known gang member or using gang hand signs. This a lot of times is what prison kind of gang units do. When people send in letters or if they try to send any pictures in, they'll collect those, make copies of the pictures, and then they'll see, okay, well, this person's a gang member, so everybody who's being associated with them is also a gang member. If you're named on a gang document, hit list, or graffiti, identified as a gang member by a reliable source, they don't really say what's reliable, arrested in the company of gang members or associates, and again, they say gang members or associates. Well, I'm an associate. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm a gang member. Corresponds, if you ever write a letter to prison and somebody's a gang member, an identified gang member in prison, they document that correspondence, they keep track of it, they surveil it. And then if you write about gangs on walls, books, or paper, you're identified as a gang member. When I ever do this, and I ask my students this at Cal State San Marcos, I get close to 70% of my students standing up. They answer yes to these questions. So about 70% stand up. And by California standards, they'd be identified as a gang member, when in reality, the overwhelming majority of my students are not gang members. But what this does is these are a series of questions that oftentimes targets Blacks and Latinos. So when we look at this Cal Gang database, there's about 200,000 people on this database. There are not 200,000 gang members in California. But on this database, you look and 66% are Latino, 20% are Black, 8% are white. And one of the things about gang injunctions is there's never been a gang injunction on a white supremacist organization. There's a lot of white motorcycle gangs out there. There's a lot of white supremacist organizations out there. They are not identified as gang members. And again, you got about 201,000 people on that Cal Gang database. Now, what does it mean? And somebody answered me if they got the answer to this question. If you're on the Cal Gang database, what does that mean for you? Don't all
You're
jump at once.
You're marked for
okay.
life.
Okay, and do you know what the penalties that come with that? So you're marked, and that's actually a beautiful way of saying it. Hey, you got that mark on you, and that mark means, just like the Black codes did, if you're Black and you have that mark, then you're subjected to a whole new set of rules. So things like hanging out with family members could get you sent back to prison. But also, if you go in and even shoplift, let's say you go and shoplift, or I'll take one from some of the youngsters that I was working with up in Central California. Young dude gets on the bus, he's with a friend, he sees somebody he doesn't like, these two friends jump him. How much time do you think that gets? It's a school fight, nobody's hurt, no major injuries, a little bit of blood, but no broken bones, nothing that's long lasting. What do you think that young person got for that fight? Shout out some years. It doesn't just shout out some years that you think.
2 years.
2 years, higher. Higher than
7
7.
years.
10 years.
10 years. Yep.
Yeah, I know,
said
like
10,
assault's like 2 to 5 years, ain't it?
yep. And then it was a gang involved assault. And so they gave him a gang enhancement
so
on top of that.
it got doubles. Yeah,
Yep.
gang enhancements.
Yeah, and so the thing is the prosecutor didn't have this dude as an identified gang member yet. So what the prosecutor did is he started going to the teachers and say, hey, we want to help this young man out. Could you come talk to me? And then the prosecutor would ask teachers questions to try to get an idea of whether or not this kid was a gang member. And so the prosecutor sought 10 years, you know, one for the assault, but also the gang enhancements, that he did this assault for the benefit of the gang. And so they were seeking 10 years. Well, we found out what the prosecutor was trying to do. And so we got the teachers all together and said, hey, don't answer their questions. Don't go and help them. They're trying to give this young kid time. And he was a good student. He just got in a fight. I got in plenty of fights. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. You know, you don't want to encourage that among young people because those fights oftentimes lead to more and more beef. But at the same time, that's not 10 years. I got in fights like that. That would have destroyed my life. And so here you are trying to destroy a young person's life for a fight on a school bus. A fight that didn't even last that long. And this prosecutor was going teacher to teacher, trying to get enough evidence that this young man was a gang member. And once you're on this gang database, you could get a gang enhancement, depending on the crime, anywhere from 3 to 5 to 15 additional years. And this is how we create, just like the slave codes did, just like the black codes, just like Jim Crow laws, recreate these gang injunctions to treat people differently based not off of what they did, but who they are. All right, any questions as we go through that? Any questions, any thoughts?
What do you think is the current logic of San Diego County getting rid of gang injunctions?
I think that the logic is that we've had people like Martin Leva, we've had people like Professor Santos, myself included. We have been fighting these gang injunctions. I also think that there's a lot of folks and organizations who have been fighting these gang injunctions. And we fought enough that the resistance they're getting for these gang injunctions is more than keeping them. And so it wasn't like, you know, the city councils and these cities, you know, like San Marcos, Escondido, Oceanside, that all have gang injunctions. Forever, those city councils were approving it. And now they've had enough people speaking out in public against it that they worry about their own political futures. And so that's one of the reasons why we're ending those gang injunctions. And I think it's absolutely beautiful that we're ending them in this county because it was a form of a kind of segregated system of justice. You didn't see any white folks on these gang injunctions. There was actually, in the history of gang injunctions in California, there was one gang, white gang, that had a gang injunction. And you can't make this shit up. They were out of Orange County and they were called the Dirty Underwear Surfer Boys. And they were on the gang injunction, but that's the only one that ever had a white gang injunction. And so I think it's beautiful, but I don't think these city council members said, hey, you know, this is a racist system, we should end it. They did it because there was outspoken public opinion about it. You know, so I know, Martine, you and I have been at the gang commission where we talked about these issues. And we you know, and we've explained to them the kind of historical legacies that these gang injunctions and their connection to the black codes. And so I think it was the organizing of people in the streets against these gang injunctions, which is why they're coming to an end. And I think that's the same thing. We're seeing more college programs in prison. It's not because prison administrators say, hey, this is a great idea. It's because we are now on the bottom to start pressuring them to do these things. I think about the very existence, and I always see what we're in right now, sacred. This is sacred. Even if it's online, this is sacred. And one of the things is that I know the work that went into it. I know the work that Martine put into this to create this program. You know, whether it was in Miracosta or whether it's in Palomar, it takes that kind of organizing. And that's the idea of transitions, is we teach folks enough so that people can start organizing to create better environments for our brothers and sisters. Richie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, I had a little incident like on my first term, like back in 03, was I was getting out of Diamond, right? And my mom and my aunt both lived together in this big old pad. So in that house was my cousin. Now he was a documented gang member from another gang, and he was on parole. But my parole officer didn't want to let me parole to the house under the same roof, even though he was my family member, my cousin. They didn't want both of us as documented gang members on parole under one roof. So I literally had to go. I had to go straight to a program called Second Chance Strive. This is when it was in downtown San Diego. Now, that was a trip though, because I couldn't even go home because of that type of like gang type of stuff like that, man. You know what I mean? Where the requirements and stuff like that just separated me and my family. You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's that reproducing of segregation. The same thing that we saw with Jim Crow laws is now what they're doing. And I see that shit all the time. They even make youngsters. I've seen youngsters, 18-year-old kids, have to carry around a gang card. You know, so if they ever get stopped by the police, they have to show that card. And that tells police, hey, I could do a whole list of other shit to you because you have that gang card. A lot of those civil liberties that other folks have outside of that system, you don't have, because once you got that gang card, you know, your Fourth Amendment rights are minimized. Just like slavery minimized the rights and constitutional rights of Black folks, we're seeing the same thing with gang injunctions and the Cal Gang database. So absolutely, Richie, you know, that story, you know, it'd be one thing if only what happened to one person, but that story is replicated over and over and over and over again. When in reality, when folks are coming out of prison, it's best that they be with their family.
Yeah,
you know, family provides
like a stable housing. I mean,
yep. And you know, if you don't have stable housing, then that prevents you from doing a lot of other things. And so again, we got this segregated system. But the thing is it doesn't stop there. You know, I want to show a little bit too about the historical legacy of lynching and why we have so many police shootings to this day. A lot of people don't really talk about this, and this is one of the things that, you know, like Texas right now is saying, hey, don't teach kids this. But we have this legacy of lynching in the United States, especially after the end of slavery. What you saw is throughout the South, when Black folks fought to have political rights or the civil rights, you saw organizations like the Ku Klux Klan develop. And the Ku Klux Klan would oftentimes, you know, somebody would be accused of committing a crime. They would go to the local sheriff who was run by the Ku Klux Klan. That sheriff would call the Klan and said, hey, we got this person here. They assaulted a white person. Come get them. And the Ku Klux Klan would gather up in a posse, in a lynch mob, and they would go take that person, and then they would lynch them in public. And this was a way of telling the Black community, rise up against these injustices, and this is what will happen to you. Now, Ida B. Wells was a famous journalist who went by and started looking at all these people who were lynched in the South and found that the overwhelming majority of the people never committed these crimes. They were never in the areas where these crimes committed. But it was just a way of gathering Black folks up to then lynch them, to communicate to the Black community, you are less than human, you don't have rights. And so I'm going to show you some pictures here. This is a typical lynch mob, and you can see a group of white faces with the body strung over the horses. Here is a mother and her child after they were lynched. And again, these were public events. These were things that you would bring your children to. These were things that you would socialize young white people into the kind of racial hierarchy of the order. Now, the thing about this was the son was accused of stealing meat from a local market. And the mom said, no, he did it for me. She tried to take the blame for it. And so they lynched both of them. This was over stolen meat at a market. Here you can see a more close-up picture of the mother. Here is a young man who was lynched in Center, Texas. This was actually a brochure that salesmen would go door to door and sell this brochure. Oftentimes when they would lynch Black bodies, they would mutilate bodies, they would cut, they would torture. And here was a fold out brochure that showed the entire lynching. And these would be sold door to door. This gives you an idea of the culture of America at the time. And again, this is after slavery. Lynchings happened all the way up into the 1960s. This one is particularly tragic because this is a father and his sons lynched. And you can see that there is a Black man on a bike behind this picture. And what he's reading is a note that is attached to the body Keep fighting for civil rights, and this will happen to you. One of the things that you found in the South is that a lot of Black men were actually lynched in their military uniforms, because during World War I and World War II, a lot of Black men went to Europe and they saw that there was more equality in Europe. There's still a lot of racism, but there wasn't the kind of segregation that you saw in America. And so when Black folks fought for the country, they came back after World War I, World War II, and said, hey, we just fought for this country. We fought for other people's freedom. Where are we going to get our freedom? And so you saw lynch mobs go after military folks because it was a way of saying, hey, you may have experienced more equality over in Europe, but you're back in the American South now. This is particularly brutal, as oftentimes bodies would be burned. And again, look at those faces. This was a gathering. This was a public gathering. This was how white people got socialized into their privilege and power. Here is another one. These were Black circus workers who were lynched during a riot in Minnesota. Again, this didn't just happen in the South, it also happened in the North as well. The thing is they were accused of raping a white woman. But when they went back and looked at the case, they were performing in a circus when this rape apparently occurred. So they weren't even in the same area, but yet they were still lynched. And you could see these smiling white faces, people dressed to the T. Here's another one. Now, this one is actually a postcard. They lynched this person here, and on the back of the postcard that was sent through the mail says, this was made in the courtyard in Center, Texas. He's a 16-year-old Black boy. He killed Earl's grandma. She was Florence's mother. Give it to Bud from your Aunt Myrtle. Now, they went back and investigated this case. That young man had nothing to do with the murder. And that actual murder was actually committed within the family. So Earl's grandma was killed by a white person within the family, but yet this Black young man was accused of it. Here's another postcard. And this is something that was sent from Joe to his mother. This is the barbecue we had last night. My picture is to the left with a cross over it. Your son, Joe. You can't get any more sick than this. This is particularly brutal. And this is part of American culture. And this is the form of lynching that existed in this country up into the 1960s, 1954. You know, we can see the kind of lynching of Emmett Till here. This is the lynching of Emmett Till. And Emmett Till, this one was particularly crazy because Emmett Till's mother said, I'm having an open casket funeral. And this was the open casket funeral because she found that when her son was mutilated and body dumped into the river, she said, I want America, I want the world to see the brutality of the American South. I want them to see the brutality of American racism. And so she actually had an open casket funeral, and that picture was published across the world, and it became and sparked the civil rights movement. This happened in 1954 and was one of the images that helped spark, among a lot of other things, that helped spark the civil rights movement in the United States. Now, a lot of people can say, and again, I apologize for this harsh picture and this harsh historical story that I'm telling, but the tragedy is that this continues to this day. In the United States, we have more people killed by the cops than any other industrialized country in the world. Here is a video, and I hope that we can play this one here and that you can hear everything. This is a little brief video I made of unarmed people who were shot by police. And this is just a sampling. Every year we have about 1,000 people who are shot by the police. You know, that one is particularly difficult because you see that that lynch mob is still alive and well in the United States. All of those people in those pictures were unarmed. And the reality is I could go on for days. That video would play for days if we just showed the number of unarmed people killed by the police since 2015. I actually have a document. It's 69 pages long, and it's 8-point font. And it has a list of everybody killed by the police since 2015. We as a country are one of the few industrialized countries where we see this amount of police shooting every single fucking year. And then I included the pictures at the end. Those are all kind of rebellions that have happened in the United States since 1965. Just as I've shown you how the prison system looks very similar to the convict leasing system today, our prison system today looks very similar to the convict leasing system. The same thing is true with lynching compared to police killings to this day. And you can kind of look here at this chart. In 2018, Germany had 14 police killings. Canada had 4. Britain had 1. Japan had 3. In the United States, we had 992. And what we see is a disproportionate number of Black and Latino folks and Southeast Asian folks, particularly Samoan, killed by the police. And again, a number of them are unarmed. And so in the United States today, if you are a, just everyday citizen, you're about 8 times more likely to be killed by the police than a terrorist, as documented by the Department of Homeland Security. So the police actually do more killings in the United States than so-called terrorists. If you are a Black man between the ages of 15 to 24, you are 21 times more likely to be killed by the cops than your white counterpart. These statistics are directly transcended from the slave codes, from the Black codes, from Jim Crow laws to now what we have is the drug war. And we could start looking at incarceration rates. If anybody's familiar with apartheid, I was coming of age and we organized and fought in the United States against apartheid as a way of being allies to those who fought against apartheid in South Africa. Now, apartheid South Africa is just like Jim Crow America. It says, hey, if you are Black South African, then you are subjected to a whole new set of rules. You can't go into these neighborhoods. If you want to go into these neighborhoods, you have to carry your documents and a pass that shows that you have work in those neighborhoods. So even under apartheid South Africa, their incarceration rate of Black men was 851 for every 100,000 people. So about 1% of the Black male population was incarcerated in apartheid South Africa. In America, under Prohibition, under the drug war, that number is 4,347. So that means at any given point, about 5% of the Black population is incarcerated. This is a direct translation from the institution of slavery. And we can even break that down for other groups as well. White men have a very high incarceration rate, especially poor white folks. Working class white folks also catch hell in this system. But when you look at it, compare it to Latino, you're looking at close to 2% of Latinos in the United States are incarcerated at any given day. And for Blacks, that's close to about 4.3%. That's fucked up. And you can see the differences. There's a lot fewer women who are incarcerated, but you can still see the racial disproportionality of it. And so you have a system and a system of incarceration that is contingent, not based off of what people do, but rather who they are. And what I mean by that is if we really wanted to go after people who commit crime, a lot of the major crimes in this country are created by white folks, but we never talk about it. So for example, the men in this classroom here have a 1 in 2 chance of getting cancer in their lifetime. Women have a 1 in 3 chance of getting cancer in their lifetime. Why are we in the midst of a cancer epidemic? And a lot of that is because of the pollution released by corporations. A lot of that is the way they contaminate our water supply. We are more likely to die at the hands of a corporation than we are a gang member. And so you can kind of look at this, and this kind of shows you the system that we built up over the years. The green dots that you see, those were prisons that were in existence in 1900, yellow, 1940, orange, prisons that were built by 1980, and all the red dots were prisons that were built by 2000. We have one big ass prison nation. If you look at Florida, Florida is one gigantic prison. But even California is like the world's second largest prison system. Those dots in California, it doesn't look like there's that many of them, but those dots are huge prisons, oftentimes that house anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 people. They're mega prisons. And so you could see this kind of expansion of our prison system and how it looks today. This is what I want to do, and I'm going to recap this presentation real quick so we can have some conversation. I showed you how we got from this to this to this. So we have here cotton plantation, overseer. Convict leasing system, overseer. Phoenix Maricopa jail system, overseer. You can also begin to look here, Angola prison, Louisiana, overseer. Notice the racial dynamics. Again, this isn't a colorized photo. This is a contemporary picture of what Angola prison looks like in the cotton fields to this day. You can also go back and look at living conditions. This is George Washington's slave quarters. This is the quarters during the convict leasing system. This is California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. You see the similarities? How the fuck are you going to put that many people in a gymnasium? Make them all share toilets. Make them all sleep with, some grown men who can snore like a motherfucker. And you think that there's not going to be problems? They're creating those problems. They create the conditions. I forget who it was earlier who was talking about, hey, a lot of people want to come out of that cell to be able to work. Well, they're creating those kind of conditions. They're creating those exploitive conditions. Any human being, any psychologist would say, you put people in those kind of conditions, there's going to be violence. They know that, but they don't care. We can also look at the punishments under slavery. Punishments, this is a 14-year-old young man who refused to work in the convict leasing system. This is how they put him all day until people came back from work. Well, we got the same thing in the CDC. We have these restraint chairs that have resulted in a lot of deaths throughout prisons in the United States. You put people in these restraint chairs. A lot of the, even manufacturers of these restraint chairs say you don't put people in these things for more than an hour. But in prisons across the United States, they're oftentimes putting people in these for 23 hours. They get blood clots and die. Or you got here, anybody know what this is?
Group therapy.
Who was that? Was that Lawrence?
Yeah.
Man, I wish I could say you're wrong, but fuck, you're right.
Been there.
This is group therapy. And then you got a therapist who's sitting out here and say, why are you angry? Motherfucker, look around, I'm in a cage. We treat dogs better than this. If you look at a kennel at the Humane Society, the kennels are bigger than this. But yet we put human beings in cages like this. And it's not just the human beings. Think about, there's a company that says, you know what, we're going to produce cages and we're going to sell it to the California Department of Corrections and we're going to make a profit off of it. Even in the former California Youth Authority, we had cages for youngsters when they went to school. Oh, these are particularly violent kids. Of course they're violent. You put them in a cage. A human being in a cage, what do you think's going to ultimately, these pictures got out in the press and then they had to stop using these cages in the juvenile system. You have a system in California where we've got folks living in these kind of crowded environments. It's getting a little bit better now with realignment, but you can look here at this prison. There are about 4,800 people in the prison, 150 people in that gym, and 3 staff on duty. And in this prison, you will see that they produce, close to, I believe, is 2,000 shoes a day. They also produce bread for the rest of the prison systems at about 18,000 loaves a day. And then these are the conditions that people live in. And again, these are, you got a television in here. This is high living in the sense. It's better than living in a barrack style. But you put people in these kind of conditions, which look very similar to the kind of conditions of the convict leasing system. You give people 50 cents an hour, but the state's going to take half of that. We have, just like slavery produced a lot of exploited labor, we have a number of corporations that are in our prison system to this day, from IBM to Compaq to Texas Instruments to Honeywell to Motorola to Chevron to Boeing. Even Victoria's Secret uses prison labor. And that prison labor paid at 25 cents an hour for those folks who think the Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves, they haven't seen our prison system. And so that's my presentation, and I would love to have a bunch of conversations now. Let me get out of my PowerPoint here, but I would love to have some conversations with y'all about this and what you think.
First of all, let me just say something before I ask the students to share, because I'd like you all to share. I'm gonna put up a discussion post based on today's presentation, so there's some extra credit opportunity, but this is your opportunity to really have a deep conversation about these things. And I know that some of those images may have been hard to watch, especially, you know, for those of us who know people who've been killed by cops, which there's probably quite a few in here. You know what I mean? Like, but this is what justice studies is about. This is about looking at the system from the outside in, right? From the outside in and saying this is system's kind of fucked up. And, you know, even though we're in school, even though you're getting an education, in a lot of areas of what we just talked about, you're still a target. I'm still a target in certain areas. So, you know, the more we talk about it, the more we can come to solutions. So I would encourage a lot of you to go ahead and participate in conversation. Just want to put that out there. Anybody too. Come on now.
No, I was gonna say, like, you know, when I seen those pictures of those cages, that was a way, like when we were in AdSeg, we'll come out of our cell and they'll put us in those cages to do, you know, like group therapy or watch a movie or whatever class we were taking, we was in those cages. Or if we had to talk to the site, we was in those cages. So, you know, it became like I was saying, it was comfortable for me to be in those cages because it was when I was outside those cages, that's when I started feeling like, you know, uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And it was something about those cages that brought like some kind of like, I don't know if I want to say like protection or some kind of defense or some kind of, I don't know, but you know, it was from being in that AdSeg a lot or the SHU, those cages became like part of our identity, and it was kind of like weird, you know what I mean? But and even like the shackles, you know what I mean, when they chained us up so much and or jumpsuit, you know, it became part of our identity too. And it was when I became back into blues or back into street clothes, that's when it became like you know, it was new to me. You know what I mean? I'm barely getting comfortable with them right now, you know what I mean?
But think about what that means. You know, if you can make somebody comfortable in a cage, you guarantee that those folks are coming back.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You guarantee, you know, and
I remember like I had to go like when I was getting visits, you know, from like my mom, my sister, my brother, you know, we'll come in and we're like, you know, in this white jumpsuit, we're shackled up. We had like 3-4 cops escorting us, and it just like, to my mom, my brother, my sister, they knew who I was. You know what I mean? I wasn't that violent guy, but all that like attention like that brought like, it intimidated people. It made us to like, well, we're monsters and stuff. And that's not who we were, but that was just their procedure of escorting a prisoner to another setting. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean? I don't know, sometimes they do a little too much with that too, because they bring out like a big old can of, it looked like a fire extinguisher of pepper spray. And then they'll bring their batons out, and then, you know what I mean, they'll have it pointed at us. And then the whole thing, it was just like intimidation tactic, you know what I mean? But it was a trip though, man.
Yeah, I remember.
It's one thing. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I just wanted to say, I remember one time I was in AdSet at Wasco, right? And my sister came to visit, and he was behind glass. And the walk from the cell to the glass, they had me in handcuffs, 2 guards, because I was an AdSeg, you had to wear white. But the guards knew for a fact that I was not a threat. People getting visits are not a threat. I want my visit. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna do anything at all. The system knows that, but it also perpetuates this idea that this individual is dangerous. It's hazard pay because they're an AdSeg. You know what I mean? They got it on their show. And then what Richie was just talking about was that internalized belief that maybe I'm more comfortable in this place than anywhere else, right? And so I recognize that. I highly recognize that. But you know, we're not threats the way they make us look like threats, right? So.
Nah,
I think I'm just like, to me, like, if a guard or society would just like, I think I'm just misunderstood. You know what I mean? Like if someone had like 10 minutes with me and then got to know who I was, like really deep down inside, like just throw a conversation, you'll figure out that I ain't that person that my paperwork or, you know what I mean? And so on is meant to be. I mean, they just like discriminated me. They turned me into like something that I wasn't, you know, which was a label, a prison identity or whatever it was, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you know what I mean? I'm just a human just like everyone else is, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Richie, you're breaking down some theories, but that's exactly the system. Because like you said, if people knew you, they couldn't put you in a cage. You know what I'm saying? You can't.
Yeah.
But if they get outsiders to believe that you're dangerous, a gang member, a criminal, all these terms that we use to dehumanize people, then that cage becomes okay. And so they actually, and you said it, they have to mark people. They have to create that danger to justify their own criminality. And that's, and you know, the thing that, Richie, man, you're bringing, I'm getting a little excited here, man, but you're bringing some heavy theory in here, because when I was going through the juvenile detention center, ain't none of those children deserve to be in a cage. If we could have gotten a lot of those young folks out into universities and the classrooms, they would have excelled. But you have to justify why they're in a cage. And so I always thought, okay, well, if this system's about rehabilitation, why is it doing that? But then I realized it's even worse than warehousing, because what they're doing is they're creating this category of youngster that is deserving of dehumanizing treatment. Now, that youngster isn't that, but they have to create that in the minds of others to justify the fact that we lock up more children than any other country in the globe. And so the tragedy of that, and you know, the thing is, the people, youngsters who rebelled against it by flooding toilets, I didn't worry about them. The people I worried about were the ones who accepted it, because they started to believe that, Mark. They started to believe the kind of criminal labeling that was happening to them. And once you start to believe, hey, I'm just a convict, then the sky's the limit with what can be done to you. But if you think of yourself as a student, as you think of yourself as, hey, I'm not, I'm not just somebody who's enslaved. I am somebody who, yeah, this is a situation that this country has put me in, but this is not who I am, and I will exist beyond these bars. That's a dangerous person. And I've talked to all the lifers, Lawrence included here, but one of the things I've always seen with some of the lifers is that they have this wisdom where their mind transcends the bars. If they can lock your mind up like they do your body, they could do anything to you. But those lifers that I've met, people who have inspired me, people who have kind of made me the man I am today, those lifers are the ones who have that kind of wisdom that transcends those bars. You can do all of this to me, but you can never lock up this mind. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's why I always consider this place right here where we're at, this is sacred, because this is where we start to transcend the kind of shackles that our society places on us.
Let's go with Larry and then Luis.
Thank you, Dr. Chris, for the presentation you've given us. And watching the whole thing, it kind of reminded me of a buddy of mine who was on the gang injunction. And after so many years after I haven't seen him, and he was on a completely different path than when I first saw him. And come to find that he was on the run, and he was being pursued by the police, but he was done, on the run. He wanted to do a peaceful surrender. So he put his shirt over his head and he put his hands up, and they still shot him 22 times. And that reminds me of how you say that, they want to paint an image on you. They want to, give you the worst name possible. I can only imagine what was going on, circulating about him. And it just, 22 times, with his hands up and his shirt over his head, is excessive. And I guess the point that I'm bringing up is, what question, I wanted to ask was that, how can we address it? Is it voting, I want to know more, along learning the lines, what it is, about sociology. But what exactly do you think that it would take to go ahead and make this change, from the
one of the things is I'm a gardener, and I grow bamboo. And one of the things about bamboo is if you put a seed in the ground, it grows for, a long ass time before you even see it. But what it's doing is it's growing its roots. And then once it, years later, once it pops up, that bamboo could grow 90 feet within 5 months. But all that time prior, when it was just the seed, it was growing under the ground. And I think that's what transitions is. And again, I keep going back to this being sacred. What we're trying to do with transitions and what we're trying to do in, North County, just on a smaller scale, is we're trying to create a prison to school pipeline. And the more people get educated, I'm not just talking about, formally educated, I'm talking about educated in a critical way. The more folks that we can produce coming out of prison who can fight back against that system, who have that intelligence to see beyond those marks that have been put on them and start organizing. As individuals, we're like an ant. I could kill an ant. But when they start organizing and they take over your whole cabinet, the motherfuckers don't go ever. I've been fighting ants for 5 years, and it's because they organize. And they're not just one ant. I could kill an ant. But these ants in my house, they are relentless. Every fucking year, man, I get these little things that they take back to their communities and tries to get them off, but they still come. And I think we need to be like ants. The more we organize, the more we get educated, and we get educated through organizing too. Organizing and fighting against the system is one of the best educations you can get. But the more we start organizing on the ground, that's how we change it. But I'm not at all, I've been working in the system for 23 years. I'm not at all relying on prison administrators to change the system. I'm about pressuring them. I'm about us getting into those positions. I'm about folks like Martine getting to be director of Project Rebound. I'm about Martine getting to teach these classes. For me, ultimately, I want my work to be replaced by people who've experienced incarceration. I want the next person who takes my place to be somebody who's experienced that and their mind has transcended the prison system, and now they're teaching. So I want more and more folks who have been through this experience. I want more and more working class folks. I want more of our brothers and sisters, our young people of color out there organizing. And I think that's the only way to do it. And the great thing is that we have our ancestors who have done it before us. We have our folks like Joaquin Murrieta. We have our folks like Ida B. Wells. We have the folks who struggled before us, and that's what the legacy that we have to continue. I don't want to talk too much. Luis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Dr. Bickel, when you were talking about ants, it made me think of that Disney movie, A Bug's Life. Yeah, where the grasshoppers were oppressing the ants, and then they had enough, and they gathered together, and then they overthrew the grasshoppers. And when I saw the pictures of the cages on your presentation, and it made me think of intersectionality, because even within the prison and jail system, there's privilege in there. For example, like when I was in AdSeg, they turned everything off for us, the lights, the TV, because it was Valentine's Day, and the vets mod, they brought in a live band. Their wives came in, music, and we were just stuck there with nothing to do. Because they were celebrating Valentine's Day for them.
Yeah, and so there's a hierarchy within the hierarchies, and there's lines within the lines. So absolutely, and even in the prison systems, you'll see a difference between the kind of services available when you have a majority white prison compared to when you have a majority people of color prison. Like, for example, go to the prisons in Vermont, you see a lot more services, a lot more rehabilitation, and their prisons tend to be disproportionately white. So absolutely, I think an intersectional analysis is critical when we're talking about the prison system. Yeah, I'm loving the comments and conversations, so keep it going.
You know what? I'd like to hear from some women. I'd like to hear from some women in this space, because it's important. Your voice is very, very important. Natalie?
Okay, so this is a really good presentation. This is a good discussion. I've been trying to go, I want to go to sleep because I've been up all night, but like this is so good. Like I can't get away from the computer. Thank you, Dr. Bickel, for the presentation. Super like eye-opening for me, like as a female who's been incarcerated, because well, I've never been in prison. I've just been in county, and like to be honest, like being locked up in Las Colinas is not anything like what I just saw like on your presentation. Never seen those cages in my life. I didn't even know those things existed. And from my experience in Las Colinas, it's like a brand new prison. It's beautiful. It's big. It's like a college kind of setting, you know, like I was a trustee, so I had privileges. Like it was easy to adapt, but like looking at that prison and like all those, like, I don't know. All I'm saying is like, I've just never experienced anything like that as a female and being incarcerated. I don't know what women prisons look like because I've never been to prison, but the analogy of like, you know, like prison workers being like slaves is interesting to me too, because like when I was an inmate worker, like I was just stoked to be working, like, and I didn't really even look at it like because I would get money on my books and stuff like that, so I really didn't care if I got paid or not. I worked in the kitchen, you know, like 6 days a week, 9 to 5. So like that just made my time go by quick, you know. So like I never really like considered it to be kind of like slavery, and now seeing your presentation and talking about it, like it really is, you know. And then just like your video, like your pictures of like how they did like punishments in the past and stuff like that. Like I'm just not educated when it comes to slavery and like the punishments and like all that stuff. It's really interesting to me. I mean, I know we've come somewhat far, but like we have a long way to go. But I just want to thank you because I really did open my eyes, and like the fact that you said like the set of rules are put in place like because of who you are and not what you've done is like not disgusting, but I don't know how to say it. I don't know what word I'm saying, but like just crazy. It's crazy, you know, like it's just crazy. It should be for what you did, not for who you are. So I know we have a long way to go, like as a society, as you know, humans and stuff, but I just want to thank you for your presentation. Super eye-opening, super interesting. This is a good class, so thank you.
Can I ask, how much did you get paid when you were working in the kitchen?
$1.50 a week.
Okay, so that's a little bit higher of a salary, but still, think about if that would have been a living wage, how much money you could have saved to get you on your feet when you get out.
Yeah, I mean, I worked 48 hours a week.
And 8 of those should have been overtime, so you should have got time and a half.
Yeah,
I mean,
for real.
And this is what I'm saying is, you know, a lot of people who go into prison don't have that much money. And that's one of the reasons that explains some of the crime. So give people a living wage so that they have that money when they get out. So many people get out and they walk out and they get that $200 and they get the clothes they went in with, and that's it. And,
Yeah, I mean,
if
I
I'm
think
coming out,
they pay you like that because they can.
Yeah.
Like we as inmate workers, we don't have a choice. We don't have to be inmate workers, but we could just be locked up like almost all day long and not have anything to do and be bored and blah, blah, blah. Like, at least I felt like I was doing something with my time, you know, and like, honestly, to be like in the kitchen and like working the line and stuff, like you saw people coming like, hey, what are you doing back? Like, it was kind of like a social thing, even though we were talking to each other. But I felt like I was doing something with my time and like actually, you know, like built confidence and built, you know, self-worth again, because like in my addiction, I had none of that. And like I hadn't worked for like 3 years. So it was like a blessing in disguise for me to be able to work. Like I've been in sewing, I've been in the kitchen. I would have done anything, to be honest with you, and I would have worked for free just to be able to get out of blues and be able to get that extra mattress, the pillow, the extra visitation, the staying up late, the sodas, the ice cream. Like, I mean, they make it very inviting to be an inmate worker for 10 cents an hour, 10 cents a week. It doesn't even matter. Like I would have done it for free. So I was stoked to get the $1.50 a week.
Yeah, and that's, they keep you in conditions such of deprivation that they can use those carrots, the sodas and all of that to make you do what they want. And that's, but they have to keep you in deprivation in order for those carrots to work.
Yeah,
You know.
especially the extra visit, like the extra visitation time, like that was it. That was the deal for me. And then like I got like video visits too during work time. So that was like, hey, like I get to get out of work for a minute just to be able to go, visit with my mom or dad or whoever. But I really didn't know that prisons had that, like that prisons were set up like that, and like a gym like that, that like I put in the chat is like a total setup. It's just like a vicious circle, like like a catch-22. Like you're in there for whatever, and then you're just gonna be like stuck in there, and then like we as like human beings, we need like space sometimes, and like to be crowded like that, and the anxiety, stress, and the whatever you're going through when you're locked up, it's just a glutton for like extra punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned Las Colinas, and one of the things, Las Colinas was built because of, prisons now when they're built, and there's still a lot of work to be done, but there's a little bit more movement towards having more rehabilitation in the prison. And that's because of organizing out on the street. And so that's why that prison looks a little bit different. The newer ones look a little bit different. We still got a long ways to go. But ideally, I'm a prison abolitionist, so I don't think we need prisons. There are some folks, and anybody who's been in prison knows, like, there's a very small group of people in prison who need to be there. And that's oftentimes because they've experienced so much trauma in their life that, they can't be outside for safety. But the overwhelming majority of people don't need to be in prison. And I would say that the prisons that we have left, those need to look more like universities than prisons. If you go to Norway, their prisons are oftentimes run by folks who are incarcerated there. They've got their own democratic systems. They've got recreation. They've got vocational things they can do. They're not paid slave wages. And what you see in Norway is people don't return to prison. But we build our prisons exactly as we do so that people return back to them, so that the manufacturer of those cages, so that those guards continue to have a job. I was working at a juvenile detention center as a volunteer, and I was talking to one supervisor, and he was like, "Hey, Chris, they say crime don't pay, but it sure as hell is paying my salary." And that's why we have them. There's a whole group of people who rely on those prisons. There's a whole group of manufacturers. Who produces that toothpaste that goes into the prison? Who produces all the soda? Who produces all of that? And not only that, you also get that steady supply of labor, so corporations could use that labor to sell their products. And that's why we have this prison, and that's the trap. And that's why I say programs like transitions, that's our Underground Railroad. You know how they had the Underground Railroad that freed people from slavery? Educational programs like this is our Underground Railroad. And I know that we're running on time. I will sit here and talk to y'all for 2 more hours, and I'm always the last one to leave a class. But I want to say something about education before I go. Don't get twisted in thinking education is about writing papers. It is in part about that. It's not about always reading the articles, although you got to do that. Education is teaching you how to think. It's teaching you how to learn. So as you go through this process of education, think about how you learn. And if you can develop a learning method, you won't need these classes. Our goal as teachers, at least me and Martine, the way we think about it, is we want to get you to a point where you don't need us. And so if you learn a learning method, you could take what you're learning in your classes, and you could use that same learning method to go learn another language, to learn how to garden, to go cook. For me, I went through a lot of education, and education was the way that I got out of my neighborhood. And forever, I thought it was about the assignments and grades and all that. But the reality is, once I finished, I realized that education taught me how to learn. And so I'll give you an example. My partner, my girlfriend that I live with, her father got cancer about 4 years back. And the insurance company was fucking with us. They tried to deny coverage. They tried to deny the service. They tried to deny all of those things. And I learned then the power of my education, because what I did at that point is I went and looked at the Affordable Health Care Act. It's like a 1,000-page bill. I started studying the fuck out of it, just like I would for a class paper. And I studied it all week. And I found out that, hey, you can't deny us coverage under these conditions. And then we took him to court and we won. And now he's living. That's education. I also think about, one of the things I'm hoping to have kids soon. We're really trying. And I'm the chef in the house. Now, I don't know how to cook, but over the last few years, I started really taking cooking seriously. I started learning on my own, started watching YouTube videos. I took that learning method that I got in college and I started to learn how to cook. And I'll be happy to say last night I served my lady some nice lobster tails with some truffle infused potatoes. And that's what the shit that I'm talking about. Education is not just what happens in the classroom. Education is learning how you learn. And everybody learns different, but learning that method and then applying that method anywhere you go. And so as you go through this college, keep in mind that you're learning how to learn and you can use it anywhere. You won't use when you're done.
Yeah.
And I also gave you my phone number. That's my cell phone number. Any class that I teach and any of Martine's students are just like my students. And I always tell my students that you have a lifetime commitment from me. And so use that number. You know, if you want to apply to college and you want me to look at your essays, if you got a cover letter and you're applying for a job and you want me to look at that essay, I can do that. I'm a writer, so I edit people's work. That's my phone number and you have a lifetime commitment from me. Just make sure if you call, you can always text. But if you call, leave a message because, man, I get hella spam messages. So I don't answer my phone anymore unless I recognize the number. But always leave a message or text me and I'll get right back with you.
Let's go ahead.
So that is a lifetime commitment.
Before we end, we had Bree and Lucia who would like to share real quick. So Bree?
Yes. So, you know, I grew up in a pretty traditional household, and, you know, there's a lot of things that are brought up in this class that I just, you know, I didn't learn about. I didn't know until I was, you know, until I experienced other things in life and then was brought here into this class. And, you know, it's just really interesting to me because I've done a lot of growing in the last couple of years and learning a lot of things that I never thought I'd be learning about. And one of the things you were talking about today was the injunctions, the gay injunctions. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that existed. And so it was funny because I saw someone, I think actually I saw Luis post something on Facebook like near the beginning of summer term where he was talking about gang injunctions. And I was like, oh, I kind of wonder what that is. Like, obviously, you know, he's pretty proactive in his community. It's probably something along that, but I had no idea like what the details of it were or what it meant. And it just kind of blows my mind. And then I also just wanted to say that you know, people talk a lot about prisons being like a form of rehabilitation, but really when it comes down to it, like there's not really a lot of rehabilitating that's happening. And it's a lot of just, you know, it's just wording for companies to use for the public to make them think that they're doing good and the public should just keep paying them, you know, to keep them profiting off of exploiting people. So it's just really sad. And you know, a lot of times there's situations that people are in, they, you know, they really do need that real rehabilitation. Like, you know, they could really use you know, resources and help with things, in the prison system isn't giving them anything. They're just, you know, exploiting them for labor or profit.
Yeah. And beautifully said too. And one of the things too is I've started critiquing this idea of rehabilitation. I like the idea, but I think it's too, you know, sometimes it gets too individual. Like, oh, we're going to send this person to prison and they're going to rehabilitate. Well, if they went to prison because of their environment, then we're never changing their environment. I want a social rehabilitation. You know,
it doesn't need to be you know, in the prison system. We can have other systems that rehabilitate.
Yeah, and I think it's good to have individual rehabilitation. I'm all for it. But I would also like to see a society be rehabilitated where we don't have 25% of our children growing up in poverty. I would like to have a society of rehabilitation where our Black and Latino brothers and sisters don't have to worry about their interactions with the police. And so I think one of the things that we do with folks in prison, we're always, oh, they need to rehabilitate, but we never look at ourselves and the society in which we live in. There is something definitely wrong in a society, especially as wealthy as ours, where we can send fucking billionaires to space, but we don't take care of the 25% of our children who are in poverty. So yeah, beautifully said, Bree.
Let's go, Lucia. I'd like to definitely hear from her, and then we'll end and bring the class to an end.
Okay. So I remember when I was a minor, I went to juvenile hall, And they sent me to I was in I think 400 unit, and then I went to GRF. It's supposed to be the girls rehabilitation facility. The only thing good, it was you got to wear sweats and not wear blues. And then they would take you out like to like watch a movie, and then if you were doing good, you would go to McDonald's. But there's nothing that they were doing to like make us be better or like, you know, any different. You're still locked up, but the doors didn't lock no more. You could knock and they would let you out to use the restroom, and you would watch movies. So you're still in jail, but it's kind of more like free. You can leave the front, you can leave if you wanted to like run away. The door was open like in the front, you know. And like Natalie was saying, like Las Colinas, like I was there too, and I also did like the kitchen, and then I also did like the pushing the carts to the dorms so they can eat. And like it is like a college, it's like a university, like it's free. Like when you're a trustee, you can play volleyball, you can walk around, and you got like, I want to do the trustee because you got 2 trays. And like I didn't get money for my commissary, so I was like, fuck yeah, you get 2 trays, like, you know. And then like I never been in prison, so when the pictures that we were seeing, I was like, man, that's crazy. Like I probably end up going crazy up in there because you'd be in a cage, and that's just, I don't know. My brother was in prison a lot, so he wouldn't really tell me like what would go down there because, you know. So it's just, this is a good thing, you know, to see all these pictures. But it gets me mad too, like from what people have gone in the past. It gets me angry and it gets me upset, and it makes me want to do something different, you know, to use my voice, use my what I'm learning here to make a difference. And that's all I have to say.
Man, listen, you're speaking wisdom right now, because you know you're talking about, yeah, they give you these privileges, but none of those privileges are really helping you improve as a human being. What if part of the privileges and part of it was, hey, you get to go and get some college credit, get some college classes, you know, and actually make enough wages so when you get out, you can have, you know, your feet on the ground. But see, they give these little tiny privileges and all that shit, man. It goes back to this whole, you know, psychology. I don't know if you've ever heard about, but there's B.F. Skinner was this dude who realized that if you give mice punishment and rewards, they'll navigate the maze faster. And that's exactly what they're trying to do to human beings. Oh, we give them these rewards that'll, you know, reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. But the thing that it doesn't realize is that human beings are not mice. We can actually look at the conditions and say, hey, your punishment of putting me in a cage is inhumane. I don't stand for this system. And I think also you mentioned a kind of that importance of helping folks understand that they're not that system, that they're not marked. And you talked about those uniforms. Those uniforms serve a purpose. It takes all your individuality, all your brilliance, all your strength, and boils you down to a blue uniform. In the institution I was, it had Department of Youth Services on the back. And it tells you that, hey, you're a criminal. And that's what that uniform stands for. Oh, well, if you're an honor level, you can take off that blue and maybe you could have some different clothes, but it tells everybody, hey, you're a criminal. And I think that's the danger of the system. The system dehumanizes. One of the biggest problems, I think goes back to what Richie was saying, is our system, and it starts as early as juvenile detention centers, like you mentioned. It's about training young people not to view themselves as human beings anymore, but as criminals. I remember, and I'll share a quick little story. We were at a religious service, and these were the honor levels in detention center, and they got to meet with some of the church people who came in, and some of them were women. And, you know, young men, not having seen women in a while, were very excited about this. And so they got to, you know, associate with women from the church and everything. And then they went back to the unit and they were talking. These were girls their age too. And they're like, oh man, did you see her? Man, she was beautiful, man. I'd love to talk to her. And then 2 other dudes jumped in real quick, man, they ain't trying to talk to you. You're a criminal. They ain't trying to talk to you. And the young folks, and I remember this dude and the way he looked, he was like, yeah, you're right. We're just some criminals. And I had to put a stop to that. I was like, no, that's not who you are. But everything in the system, from those cages to the uniform, tries to communicate to that to people. And I think that's the power of education, because it allows us to transcend those marks that people and those labels that people try to put on us. So again, I think Lucia, I think every comment in here, there's some brilliant theoretical stuff going on in this class. And so I appreciate being here. I will always be here. You got my phone number. You can call me at any time. Again, I appreciate listening to y'all and hearing your stories. And again, the brilliance that is in this classroom, never underestimate yourself, especially if you start organizing like ants.
Well, right on. Dr. Christopher Bickel. Chris, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. Normally I ask for students to pass on their gratitude, but I'm going to pass on that one today just because of timing. But just going to say, man, I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you being in this class. And for the students, I don't see criminals at all. You know what I mean? I see students. I see students. That's what I see, and that's who I work with. I don't work with criminals. I don't work with convicts. I work with students. You know what I mean? And I work with teachers too, and all of you are students and teachers at the same time. Just like I'm a student and I'm a teacher at the same time. So we're all in it together. So with that being said, I will post up by this afternoon. I'm gonna take Chris out to lunch in a little bit, but I will post up a discussion board. The discussion board will be worth 5 points, and you'll be able to post about anything Jason Bell shared, anything Chris shared, and if you do it, you'll get 5 extra points for your grade. So with that being said, y'all, thank you all for hanging in, and this was a great class. I appreciate you all.
Hey, Martin, real quick before you go out, can I put my email down?
Yeah, go for it.
That's probably a good way, just in case people are shy and don't want to call. Here's an email. That's my email in case anybody wants to reach out. But again, don't be a stranger. Like I said, if you're Martin students, you get a lifetime commitment from me.
And that's true. I remember y'all, when I told you, when I met Chris in 2008, he said that same thing to me. We've been riding side by side this whole time, you know what I mean? So it's a very true statement there, so.
Okay, there, I think I sent it to everybody. And let me make sure, did my phone number get to everybody?
Yeah, I saw it earlier.
Okay, and so that's my email. I think I just sent it to everybody. So again, don't be a stranger. And for the brothers and sisters in here who are going through their sobriety and working on their sobriety, much respect, much props to you. I know how difficult that can get. So don't forget to take stock in how far you've come.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. All right, y'all. We'll see you Thursday evening. Y'all have yourself a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be safe out there, everyone.